Who was Asenath, and why has history nearly erased the story of one of the most influential women in biblical times? While millions know the story of Joseph's rise from slave to ruler of Egypt, few realize that behind his success stood an Egyptian wife, whose own story holds secrets that could change everything you thought you knew about this biblical hero. Today, we're uncovering the complete, untold story of Asenath, the forgotten wife whose identity, faith journey, and role in shaping the future of Israel has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. But before we get into it, if you're new to this channel, consider hitting that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support means we can continue providing these types of videos for you. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We're building a global community here. So without further ado, let's dive in, shall we? In the grand story of ancient Egypt, where pharaohs ruled like gods and pyramids touched the sky, one woman's name whispers through time like sand through fingers. Her story begins in shadow, though her life blazed with divine light. Asenath. The name rolls off the tongue like honey, sweet and golden. Yet ask most people about Joseph's wife, and they pause. They know the coat of many colors. They remember the dreams of fat cows and thin cows. The pit, the prison, the palace rise before their minds like scenes from a play. But the woman who stood beside the Hebrew vizier who bore his sons and shared his bed remains wrapped in mystery. This silence carries weight. In a world where men's deeds echo through generations, women's voices often fade to whispers. Asenath's story survived, but barely. Hidden in forgotten texts, scattered through ancient fragments, her tale waits to be told again. She was more than a footnote in Joseph's story. Beyond the simple phrase, Pharaoh gave Joseph a wife, lies a woman of flesh and blood, of fears and faith, of transformation that shook the foundations of two worlds. Her marriage bridged nations. Her conversion changed the course of history. Her sons became fathers of tribes. The ancient scribes wrote her name with reverence. Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. Each word holds secrets. Daughter of power, child of the sun god's servant. Wife to the Hebrew, who interpreted dreams. Mother to half the tribes of Israel. But who was she before the marriage? What dreams filled her nights? What gods did she worship in the temple courts of Heliopolis? The canonical texts stay silent. They give us names, dates, genealogies. They tell us she existed, but not who she was. Thankfully, other voices survived. In the shadows of Scripture, ancient storytellers preserved her inner world. They wrote of her beauty, her pride, her spiritual crisis. They captured her voice, her tears, her transformation from Egyptian priestess to Hebrew matriarch. These forgotten texts paint pictures in gold and shadow. They show us a woman of complexity, caught between worlds, shaped by forces beyond her control, yet ultimately choosing her own path. Her story unfolds like a scroll, revealing layer upon layer of meaning. At first glance, she appears as a political alliance, a gift from Pharaoh to secure loyalty, but deeper currents flow beneath this surface. Her marriage represents the joining of wisdom traditions, the meeting of monotheism with ancient mystery, the birth of new possibilities. The authors of these hidden texts understood something profound. They saw in Asenath's story a mirror for every soul's journey from darkness to light, from the worship of created things to the worship of the Creator. Her transformation became their own, her struggles their guide. Yet even as these texts preserved her voice, time worked against her memory. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell, new stories captured attention while old ones gathered dust. The canonical texts, focused on the men who shaped history, left little room for the women who shaped the men. This forgetting was not accidental. It followed patterns as old as civilization itself. Women's stories, when they survived at all, often became simplified, stripped of complexity and depth. They became symbols rather than people, functions rather than individuals. Asenath suffered this fate. She became the foreign wife, the mother of Ephraim and Manasseh, the priest's daughter. Each label contained truth, but none captured the fullness of her existence. None revealed the woman who struggled with faith, who faced down assassins, who chose love over safety. The rediscovery of her story in recent centuries has begun to restore her voice. Scholars have pieced together fragments, compared manuscripts, traced the evolution of her legend through different cultures and times. What emerges is a portrait of remarkable depth and beauty. She stands at the crossroads of history, where Hebrew meets Egyptian, where faith meets tradition, where the personal becomes political. Her choices ripple through generations, affecting not just her immediate family, but the entire future of the Israelite people. The texts describe her as beautiful beyond compare, with skin like gold and hair like sunlight. But her true beauty lay deeper, in her capacity for growth, her willingness to question everything she had been taught, her courage to embrace a new understanding of the divine. Her story challenges assumptions about ancient women. She was not passive, not merely a vessel for male ambition. She was an active participant in her own transformation, a woman who wrestled with angels and emerged victorious. The Egyptian princess who first rejected the Hebrew vizier became the loving wife who supported his vision. The priest's daughter who once worshipped Ra became the mother who taught her sons about the God of Abraham. The woman who began in pride ended in humility, not as defeat but as wisdom. Her legacy lives on in unexpected places. Every time someone chooses faith over tradition, love over safety, growth over comfort, they echo her decision. Every time someone bridges different worlds, they follow her example. Every time someone transforms their understanding of the divine, they walk her path. The silence that surrounds her name in popular memory speaks to larger patterns of forgetting. It reminds us that the most important stories are not always the loudest ones, that the most profound transformations often happen in the quiet spaces between the headlines. As we begin to unfold her story, we reclaim something precious. We restore a voice that was never meant to be silent. We remember a woman who deserves to be remembered. We discover that the forgotten wife was never forgotten by the one who matters most. Her story waits for us, patient as the desert, enduring as the pyramids, beautiful as the sunrise over the Nile. Let us listen with open hearts to the tale of Asenath, the lioness who found her roar, the daughter who found her father, the wife who found her destiny. Egypt in the time of Joseph. The sun rises over the Nile like a god awakening, painting the river gold and the desert rose. This is Egypt in the time of Joseph, a land where divine power flows through human hands, where the rhythm of the flood determines the fate of nations. The Middle Kingdom stands at its height, a civilization that has mastered the art of turning desert into garden, chaos into order. Along the river's banks, cities rise like jewels strung on a green thread. Memphis, Thebes, and in the north, the sacred city of On, where the sun god Ra receives his daily tribute. On is more than a city. It stands as the heart of Egyptian spirituality, the place where heaven meets earth each dawn. The Greeks will call it Heliopolis, city of the sun, but to the Egyptians, it bears the weight of cosmic significance. Here, the priests measure time itself, tracking the movements of stars and seasons with precision that rivals the gods. The temple complex dominates the landscape, its obelisks reaching toward the sky like fingers of stone. These monuments carry sacred texts, hieroglyphs that tell the story of creation, of Ra's daily journey across the heavens, of the eternal struggle between order and chaos. Within these walls, the priestly class holds power that rivals Pharaoh himself. They control not just religious ceremonies, but vast wealth, agricultural lands, and the education of the elite. The priest of On stands among the highest ranks of Egyptian society, second only to the royal family in prestige and influence. Into this world of ancient power and divine kingship comes something new. The Hebrew people, descendants of Abraham, bring with them a different understanding of the divine. They speak of one God, invisible yet all-powerful, who works through history rather than nature, who chooses servants rather than demanding worship. The tension between these worldviews creates the backdrop for our story. Egypt, confident in its gods and traditions, encounters Israel, passionate about its covenant and calling. The meeting of these two peoples will reshape both, but the cost will be measured in individual lives, in personal struggles, in the quiet battles fought in human hearts. The Nile itself witnesses these changes. Each year it floods and recedes, bringing life to the desert, enabling the greatest civilization on earth to flourish. The Egyptians see in this cycle the proof of their God's power, the evidence that their understanding of the divine reflects ultimate truth. But the river also brings uncertainty. Some years, the flood comes too early or too late, too high or too low. These variations require management, planning, the kind of wisdom that can interpret signs and prepare for the future. This need for divine guidance creates opportunities for those who can read the language of dreams and visions. The palace culture of the Middle Kingdom values education and refinement. The royal court attracts scholars, artists, and administrators from across the known world. Knowledge flows like wine at a feast, mixing Egyptian wisdom with foreign insights, creating new possibilities for understanding and growth. Yet beneath this sophistication lies a rigid social structure. Birth determines destiny for most people. The son of a farmer becomes a farmer, the daughter of a priest serves in the temple, the child of a slave remains in bondage. Social mobility exists but requires extraordinary circumstances, divine intervention, or both. The position of women in this society carries its own complexities. Egyptian women enjoy more freedom than their counterparts in many ancient cultures. They can own property, conduct business, and even rule in exceptional circumstances. Yet they remain bound by expectations, limited by tradition, defined by their relationships to men. For a priest's daughter, these limitations become particularly acute. She must maintain ritual purity, uphold family honor, and prepare for a marriage that will serve political and religious purposes. Her personal desires matter less than her family's needs, her individual faith less than her public role. The religious landscape of Egypt in this period reflects centuries of development. The pantheon includes hundreds of deities, each with specific roles and responsibilities. Ra rules the sun, Isis governs magic and motherhood, Osiris judges the dead. This complex system requires careful management, precise rituals, and absolute devotion. The priests who serve these gods undergo years of training. They learn to read the sacred texts, perform the daily ceremonies, and interpret the signs that reveal divine will. Their lives revolve around the temple schedule, their identities shaped by their service to the gods. Education in priestly families emphasizes both practical skills and spiritual knowledge. Children learn to read and write, to calculate and plan, to understand the movements of celestial bodies and the cycles of nature. They absorb the stories of the gods, the history of Egypt, and the responsibilities of their social position. Art and architecture in this period reach heights that will inspire wonder for millennia. The pyramids already stand as monuments to divine kingship, while new temples and palaces demonstrate the continued vitality of Egyptian civilization. These structures embody theological concepts, turning stone into prayer, space into sacred narrative. The economic system that supports this cultural flowering depends on the Nile's bounty. Agriculture provides the foundation, but trade extends Egyptian influence across the ancient world. Caravans carry goods and ideas between Egypt and distant lands, creating networks of connection that will prove crucial when famine strikes. The administrative structure of the kingdom requires skilled bureaucrats who can manage resources, collect taxes, and maintain order across vast territories. These officials often come from priestly families, their education and social connections qualifying them for positions of trust and responsibility. Into this established order comes disruption. Dreams trouble Pharaoh's sleep. Visions of fat cows and thin cows, of full grain and withered grain, suggest coming changes that will test the kingdom's stability. The court magicians and wise men fail to provide satisfactory interpretations, creating a crisis of confidence. The Hebrew prisoner who can interpret these dreams represents more than just practical help. He embodies a different way of understanding divine communication, a more personal relationship with the sacred, a tradition that values faithfulness over ritual correctness. The decision to elevate Joseph to the position of vizier shocks the established order. A foreigner, a former slave, a worshiper of an unknown god, suddenly holds power second only to Pharaoh himself. This appointment challenges assumptions about divine favor, social hierarchy, and the nature of wisdom itself. The marriage alliance that follows this elevation carries symbolic weight that extends far beyond personal happiness. By giving Joseph an Egyptian wife, Pharaoh signals acceptance of the Hebrew into the highest levels of society. By choosing the daughter of Potiphera, he links the newcomer to the most sacred traditions of Egypt. Yet this marriage also creates unprecedented challenges. How can a Hebrew monotheist unite with an Egyptian polytheist? How can a former slave integrate into the priestly elite? How can two different understandings of the divine coexist in one household? The answers to these questions will determine not just the fate of two individuals, but the future of both peoples. The union of Joseph and Asenath becomes a laboratory for testing whether different traditions can enrich each other or whether they must inevitably conflict. The stage is set for a story that will echo through generations. In the land where the sun god reigns supreme, a Hebrew dreamer rises to power. In the city where ancient wisdom holds sway, new revelations prepare to unfold. In the house where tradition defines truth, transformation waits to begin. The house of Potipharah morning light filters through the courtyard of Potipharah's estate, casting long shadows across polished limestone floors. The house stands like a small temple, its walls adorned with images of Ra's daily journey across the sky. Here, in the most sacred district of On, the priest of the sun god raises his daughter in the ways of ancient Egypt. Asenath moves through these halls like a young goddess, her bare feet silent on the cool stone. The servants bow as she passes, their reverence born of both her father's position and her own evident beauty. She carries herself with the grace of one trained from birth in the rituals of divine service, her every gesture measured and purposeful. The household runs according to the sacred calendar. At dawn, as Ra begins his celestial voyage, the family joins in prayers that have echoed through these rooms for generations. Asenath's voice blends with her father's in the ancient words, her pronunciation perfect, her understanding deep. Her education begins before sunrise each day. The house scribes teach her to read and write in both hieroglyphic and hieratic scripts, to calculate grain measures and star positions, to understand the complex mythology that governs Egyptian thought. She learns quickly, her mind sharp as a blade, her memory vast as the Nile itself. The religious instruction that shapes her days goes beyond mere knowledge. She participates in the daily temple rituals, learning to prepare offerings, to cleanse sacred vessels, to read the signs that reveal divine will. Her father watches with pride as she masters each ceremony, each prayer, each gesture that connects earth to heaven. Yet beneath this structured existence, questions stir like wind across the desert. Asenath possesses a mind that refuses to accept answers simply because they come from authority. She observes the world with eyes that see beyond the surface, that notice contradictions and inconsistencies others overlook. The temple cats fascinate her. They lounge in the sun, hunt in the shadows, and receive worship from humans who believe them sacred. But she watches them eat and sleep and fight, and wonders how creatures so ordinary can be channels for divine power. The question troubles her, though she keeps it to herself. Her father notices her thoughtfulness, but interprets it as depth of devotion. Potipharah sees in his daughter a future high priestess, a woman who will carry on the family traditions with honor and grace. He arranges for her to receive the finest education available, bringing tutors from across Egypt to refine her understanding. The house itself reflects the family's status. Rich tapestries hang from the walls, depicting scenes from the Book of the Dead and the daily rebirth of Ra. Gardens bloom with lotus flowers and papyrus plants, creating an oasis of beauty within the bustling city. Servants move through the corridors with practiced efficiency, maintaining the order that mirrors cosmic harmony. Asenath's chambers occupy the highest level of the house, with windows that look out across the temple complex to the river beyond. From here, she can see the obelisks that mark sacred time, the processions that honor the gods, the daily life of a city devoted to divine service. The other young women of her social class visit regularly, their conversations focused on marriage prospects and religious duties. They discuss the latest fashions in jewelry and cosmetics, the merits of various priests' sons, the ceremonies they will someday oversee as wives and mothers. But Asenath finds these conversations hollow. She craves something deeper, something that addresses the questions that keep her awake at night. Why do the gods require such elaborate rituals? Why do the priests interpret the same signs in different ways? Why does her heart feel empty despite all the religious observance? Her beauty becomes legendary throughout On. Young men from the finest families seek her father's permission to court her, offering lavish gifts and promising advantageous alliances. Potipharah considers these proposals carefully, knowing that his daughter's marriage will affect not just their family, but the entire priestly hierarchy. The daily routine of the house revolves around the temple schedule: morning prayers at sunrise, midday offerings when Ra reaches his zenith, evening ceremonies as the sun god begins his journey through the underworld. Between these observances, Asenath studies philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and the sacred arts. She excels in music, her voice capable of capturing the ethereal beauty required for temple ceremonies. The harp responds to her touch like a living thing, producing melodies that seem to carry prayers directly to heaven. Yet, even in these moments of transcendence, she feels a distance from the gods she serves. The palace connections that her father maintains bring news of the larger world. She hears of famines in distant lands, of wars and treaties, of the complex political maneuvering that keeps Egypt stable and prosperous. These stories kindle her imagination, making her wonder about life beyond the temple walls. Books fill her personal library, scrolls containing the wisdom of ages. She reads the creation myths, the stories of the gods' adventures, the moral teachings that guide Egyptian life. But she also studies foreign texts, learning about the beliefs and practices of other peoples, expanding her understanding beyond traditional boundaries. The festivals that punctuate the Egyptian calendar bring excitement to the household. During these celebrations, the normal routine gives way to elaborate ceremonies, public processions, and communal feasting. Asenath participates with appropriate dignity, but observes everything with the eye of a natural philosopher. She notices how the common people's devotion differs from the priest's theological sophistication. The farmers who bring offerings to the temple worship with simple faith, while the educated elite engage in complex theological debates. Both approaches seek the same divine favor, but through very different means. The marriage proposals that arrive with increasing frequency create tension in the household. Potipharah wants to arrange a union that will advance the family's position and serve the gods' purposes. Asenath respects her father's wishes, but cannot imagine binding herself to any of the young men who court her. They seem pleasant enough, these sons of priests and officials. They speak intelligently about religious matters, demonstrate proper reverence in the temple, and offer reasonable prospects for a comfortable life. Yet none of them shares her deeper questions. None of them challenges her thinking or stirs her heart. The lion imagery that decorates the house speaks to something wild in her nature. These carved creatures, symbols of divine power and royal authority, seem to mirror her own untamed spirit. She identifies with their strength, their independence, their refusal to be fully domesticated, even in service to the gods. Her father's increasing concern about her unmarried state becomes a source of daily conversation. He reminds her of her duties, her responsibilities, the importance of maintaining family honor. She listens respectfully, but cannot bring herself to accept any of the proposed matches. The honey that appears on the family table each morning carries sweetness that seems to promise something beyond present circumstances. Asenath develops a particular fondness for this golden substance, finding in its flavor a hint of possibilities she cannot yet name. Dreams begin to trouble her sleep. She sees strange visions of light and darkness, of divine beings who bear no resemblance to the familiar Egyptian gods. These nocturnal visitors speak in languages she does not understand, yet their messages seem to reach her heart directly. The tower that rises from the eastern corner of the house becomes her favorite retreat. Here, above the noise and activity of the household, she can think and pray and wrestle with the questions that increasingly dominate her thoughts. The view from these heights encompasses both the temple complex and the river, both the sacred and the secular worlds. As news arrives of the Hebrew prisoner who has been elevated to vizier, Asenath listens with growing fascination. The story seems impossible, yet reliable sources confirm its truth. A foreign slave, a worshiper of an unknown god, has been granted power, second only to Pharaoh himself. The implications of this elevation disturb the established order. If divine favor can rest on a foreigner, what does this mean for Egyptian understanding of the gods? If wisdom can come from outside traditional sources, what does this suggest about the nature of truth itself? These questions swirl through Asenath's mind as she goes about her daily routine. The familiar rituals begin to feel hollow. The ancient prayers seem to echo in empty space. Something is stirring in her heart, something that the old certainties cannot satisfy. The stage is set for transformation. In the house of Potipharah, where tradition reigns supreme, change prepares to unfold. The daughter of the sun god's priest stands at the threshold of a new understanding, though she does not yet know where it will lead. Joseph's rise to power. The prison cell in Memphis holds more than just another forgotten prisoner. Joseph, son of Jacob, sits in darkness that cannot dim the light within his eyes. His hands, once soft from his father's favor, now bear the calluses of hard labor. His dreams, once filled with sheaves and stars, now focus on survival and hope. The Hebrew's reputation grows slowly among the guards and inmates. His ability to interpret dreams sets him apart from other prisoners, men who committed actual crimes or fell victim to political intrigue. Joseph's gift operates like a divine spark, illuminating the hidden meanings in the night visions that trouble sleeping minds. The chief butler and chief baker discover this gift during their own imprisonment. Their dreams, filled with symbolic imagery of grapevines and bread baskets, find perfect interpretation through Joseph's understanding. He speaks with confidence that comes from divine communication, not human wisdom. When the butler returns to royal service, he carries a debt of gratitude that sleeps until Pharaoh's own dreams create urgent need. The king's night visions of fat cows and thin cows, of full grain and withered grain, perplex the court's wisest advisors. Egyptian dream interpretation, sophisticated as it is, cannot penetrate these particular symbols. The butler's memory awakens at the perfect moment. He tells Pharaoh about the Hebrew prisoner whose interpretations proved accurate in every detail. The recommendation carries weight because it comes from personal experience, not mere rumor or hope. The summons arrives like lightning from a clear sky. Joseph finds himself rushed from prison to palace, from rags to royal audience, from obscurity to the center of Egypt's power. The transformation happens so quickly that lesser men might lose their balance, but Joseph's years of hardship have prepared him for this moment. Standing before Pharaoh, Joseph embodies a different kind of dignity than the court has seen. His humility comes from genuine relationship with the divine, not from political calculation. His wisdom flows from divine revelation, not from human learning. His confidence rests on God's faithfulness, not on personal ability. The interpretation he offers carries both promise and warning. 7 years of abundance will come first, followed by 7 years of famine so severe that the good years will be forgotten. The repetition of Pharaoh's dream indicates certainty, the divine decree that cannot be changed or avoided. But Joseph offers more than interpretation. He presents a practical plan for managing the crisis. During the abundant years, Egypt must store grain systematically, building reserves that can sustain the nation through the coming famine. This requires administrative skill, mathematical precision, and unwavering discipline. Pharaoh recognizes divine wisdom when he hears it. The Hebrew's interpretation rings true in ways that transcend logical analysis. The proposed solution demonstrates understanding of both spiritual and practical realities. The combination of prophetic insight and administrative competence creates exactly what Egypt needs. The elevation that follows shocks the established order. Joseph, the foreign prisoner, becomes vizier of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. The signet ring, the golden chain, the fine linen garments transform his appearance, but his heart remains unchanged. He serves the God of his fathers while administering the kingdom of Ra. The 7 years of abundance begin immediately, as if nature itself responds to the prophetic word. The Nile's floods come perfectly. The harvests exceed all expectations, and Egypt prospers beyond measure. Joseph's administrative systems prove their worth as grain fills the storehouses throughout the land. The Egyptian people watch their new vizier with a mixture of curiosity and respect. His methods differ from traditional practices, his priorities reflect different values, but his results speak for themselves. The kingdom runs more efficiently, the people prosper, and the future appears secure. The priestly class observes these developments with particular interest. How does this Hebrew's God compare to their own deities? How does his prophetic gift relate to their traditional methods of divine communication? The questions create theological tension that will require careful navigation. Joseph's position brings him into contact with the highest levels of Egyptian society. He meets with district governors, temple administrators, and court officials. These interactions reveal the complexity of Egyptian civilization, its strengths and weaknesses, its capacity for both wisdom and folly. The palace itself becomes his workplace, a complex of buildings and courtyards where political power mingles with religious authority. Here, decisions that affect millions of people are made daily, policies that will shape the kingdom's future are debated and implemented. The bureaucracy that Joseph inherits reflects centuries of Egyptian administrative experience. The scribes, tax collectors, and regional governors understand their roles and responsibilities. Joseph's task involves redirecting this existing system toward the unprecedented challenge of preparing for famine. The mathematical calculations required for this preparation stretch the limits of ancient accounting methods. How much grain must be stored? How should it be distributed across the kingdom? What percentage of each harvest should be reserved? These questions require both practical wisdom and divine guidance. The construction projects that arise from Joseph's planning transform the Egyptian landscape. New granaries rise beside existing temples, storage facilities expand to accommodate the abundant harvests, and transportation networks develop to move grain efficiently throughout the kingdom. The social implications of Joseph's elevation ripple through Egyptian society. If a Hebrew can become vizier, what does this mean for traditional hierarchies? If foreign wisdom can serve Egyptian purposes, what does this suggest about the nature of divine favor? The court culture that Joseph enters values both competence and sophistication. Officials are expected to demonstrate not only administrative skill but also cultural refinement. Joseph's ability to adapt to Egyptian customs while maintaining his Hebrew identity creates a unique synthesis. The economic policies that Joseph implements benefit all levels of society. Farmers receive fair prices for their grain, merchants find new opportunities in the storage and distribution systems, and workers gain employment in the construction projects. The prosperity appears to validate divine blessing. The international reputation that Egypt gains through Joseph's management attracts attention from neighboring kingdoms. Foreign delegations arrive to study Egyptian methods, to negotiate trade agreements, and to seek guidance for their own challenges. Joseph's influence extends beyond Egypt's borders. The personal cost of this elevation remains hidden from public view. Joseph's family believes him dead, his father mourns him as lost, his brothers continue their lives without knowledge of his transformation. The success brings loneliness that few can understand. The dreams that first revealed Joseph's destiny now find their fulfillment in unexpected ways. The sheaves that bowed to his sheaf, the stars that honored his star, take on new meaning in the context of his administrative authority. Divine providence operates through human history in ways that transcend immediate understanding. The marriage proposal that Pharaoh makes represents more than personal consideration. By offering Joseph an Egyptian wife, the king signals complete acceptance of the Hebrew into the highest levels of society. The choice of Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, links Joseph to the most sacred traditions of Egypt. This union will create challenges that neither spouse can fully anticipate. How can a Hebrew monotheist unite with an Egyptian polytheist? How can two different understandings of the divine coexist in one household? The answers will determine the future of both families and both peoples. The 7 years of abundance near their end as Joseph prepares for the greater test ahead. The famine that approaches will validate either his prophetic gift or destroy his reputation. The stakes could not be higher for both the Hebrew vizier and the Egyptian kingdom. Standing at the pinnacle of earthly power, Joseph remains conscious of divine purpose. His elevation serves goals that transcend personal ambition. His authority exists to preserve life during the coming crisis. The forgotten prisoner has become the instrument of salvation for 2 nations. The stage is set for the next phase of the story. As abundance gives way to famine, as plenty transforms into scarcity, Joseph's greatest challenges lie ahead. The Hebrew who interpreted dreams will now face the test of implementing divine visions in a world that desperately needs both wisdom and hope. The marriage arrangement. The morning sun casts long shadows across the palace courtyard as Pharaoh contemplates the Hebrew who has served him so faithfully. 7 years of abundance have validated Joseph's prophetic gift, filled Egypt's storehouses to overflowing, and established the former prisoner as the most trusted advisor in the kingdom. Now, as the seasons turn and the first signs of famine begin to appear on the horizon, Pharaoh recognizes that Joseph's position requires more than administrative authority. The vizier needs deeper roots in Egyptian society, connections that will bind him permanently to the land he serves. A marriage alliance will accomplish what royal decrees alone cannot achieve. The choice of bride reflects careful political calculation. Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, represents the highest levels of Egyptian society. Her father's position as priest of Hextamon connects her to the most ancient and respected religious traditions. Her beauty and education make her suitable for the vizier's household. Her unmarried state creates opportunity for an alliance that will benefit both families. Yet, Pharaoh's decision carries implications that extend far beyond politics. By joining the Hebrew monotheist to the Egyptian priestess, he creates a union that will test whether different religious traditions can coexist. The marriage becomes an experiment in cultural synthesis, a laboratory for exploring the boundaries of divine truth. The announcement of the betrothal spreads through the court like wildfire. Nobles who have watched Joseph's meteoric rise now witness his complete integration into Egyptian society. The foreign vizier will soon become family to the priestly elite. His children will carry both Hebrew and Egyptian bloodlines. His household will embody the complex realities of empire. Potipharah receives the news with mixed emotions. The honor of having his daughter chosen for the vizier's wife exceeds his highest expectations. The political advantages of such an alliance will benefit his family for generations. Yet the religious implications trouble him deeply. How can his daughter, trained from birth in the service of Ra, unite with a man who worships an invisible foreign god? The concerns that plague Potipharah reflect broader anxieties within Egyptian society. The Hebrew's success has already challenged traditional assumptions about divine favor and earthly authority. Now his marriage to a priest's daughter will create even more complex questions about the nature of religious truth and cultural identity. Asenath learns of her betrothal through her father's formal announcement. The news arrives like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, transforming her life in an instant. The woman who has rejected numerous suitors from Egypt's finest families now finds herself promised to a man she has never met, a foreigner whose very existence challenges everything she has been taught to believe. The initial shock gives way to a mixture of emotions that she struggles to understand. Curiosity battles with fear, honor wrestles with revulsion, duty conflicts with desire. The Hebrew's reputation for wisdom and divine favor intrigues her, but his foreign origins and strange religious beliefs create barriers that seem impossible to overcome. The preparation for the wedding begins immediately. Seamstresses arrive to create garments worthy of the vizier's bride, jewelers design ornaments that will reflect her new status, and household servants prepare the quarters where she will live after the ceremony. The activity creates a whirlwind of change that leaves little time for reflection. The first meeting between Joseph and Asenath takes place in the formal setting of Potipharah's house. Both participants understand that this encounter will determine the future of their relationship. They approach each other with the wariness of diplomatic representatives, each seeking to understand the other's character and intentions. Joseph enters the house with the dignity befitting his position, yet his manner remains humble and respectful. He recognizes the significance of this moment, not just for his own life, but for the broader purposes that God is accomplishing through him. His bride-to-be represents more than personal happiness. She embodies the future of the covenant people in Egypt. Asenath observes the Hebrew vizier with eyes trained to read character and motivation. She sees intelligence in his expression, strength in his bearing, and something else that she cannot immediately identify. His presence seems to fill the room with an energy that has nothing to do with political authority and everything to do with divine anointing. The conversation that follows unfolds with the careful precision of a diplomatic negotiation. Both participants understand that words spoken now will shape their entire future together. They discuss practical matters of household management, religious observance, and family expectations. But beneath these surface topics, deeper currents flow. Joseph speaks of his God with quiet confidence that reveals the depth of his faith. He does not mock Egyptian beliefs or demand immediate conversion, but his words carry conviction that comes from personal experience with divine power. His testimony creates both attraction and resistance in Asenath's heart. Asenath responds with the knowledge and sophistication of her priestly education. She demonstrates familiarity with Egyptian theology, understanding of religious ceremony, and commitment to traditional values. Yet, her questions reveal a searching mind that is not entirely satisfied with conventional answers. The tension between them becomes palpable as the conversation progresses. They represent two different worlds, two different understandings of ultimate reality, two different approaches to divine relationship. The political necessity of their marriage cannot bridge these fundamental differences, yet something deeper than politics draws them together. Joseph's physical appearance impresses Asenath despite her reservations. The years of hardship have given him strength and resilience, while his recent elevation has restored his natural dignity. His eyes hold depths that speak of suffering transformed into wisdom, trials converted into triumph. The divine favor that rests on Joseph manifests itself in ways that transcend human explanation. His presence seems to bring peace to troubled hearts. His words carry weight that exceeds their literal meaning. His very existence testifies to the reality of divine providence. Asenath finds herself simultaneously drawn to and frightened by this supernatural dimension. The religious questions that dominate their discussion reveal the complexity of their situation. Can a Hebrew monotheist truly unite with an Egyptian polytheist? Can two different traditions of divine worship coexist in one household? Can love grow between people whose fundamental beliefs about reality differ so dramatically? Asenath's internal struggle intensifies as the meeting progresses. Her rational mind recognizes the honor and advantage of marrying the vizier, but her emotional and spiritual resistance grows stronger. She has been raised to serve Egyptian gods, to honor Egyptian traditions, to value Egyptian wisdom. How can she abandon everything she has been taught to believe? The attraction that develops between them operates on multiple levels. Physical beauty plays its part, but deeper forces prove more powerful. Joseph's spiritual authority speaks to something in Asenath's heart that her traditional religious training has left unsatisfied. His certainty about divine purpose contrasts sharply with her growing questions about Egyptian beliefs. The meeting ends without resolution. Both participants understand that their marriage will proceed according to Pharaoh's will, but the personal questions remain unanswered. They part with mutual respect, but without the harmony that successful marriages require. The days following this encounter bring sleepless nights to Potipharah's household. Asenath retreats to her chambers, wrestling with emotions and thoughts that threaten to overwhelm her carefully ordered world. The Hebrew's presence has disturbed something deep within her spirit, awakening questions she thought she had buried. The wedding preparations continue despite the bride's inner turmoil. Servants go about their tasks with practiced efficiency, creating the elaborate ceremony that will unite the vizier to the priestly family. The political significance of the event ensures that no expense will be spared, no detail overlooked. Potipharah observes his daughter's distress with growing concern. He recognizes that her resistance goes beyond normal pre-wedding anxiety. The match that seemed so advantageous now threatens to create more problems than it solves. Yet the arrangements cannot be undone without insulting Pharaoh and destroying the family's position. Joseph returns to his duties with his own concerns weighing heavily on his mind. The marriage represents more than personal happiness. It carries implications for God's purposes in Egypt. His bride's spiritual condition will affect not just their household, but the future of the Hebrew people in this foreign land. The theological implications of the union trouble both families. How can the servant of the invisible God unite with the daughter of Ra's priest? How can two different understandings of divine reality coexist in one household? The questions have no easy answers, but the marriage will proceed regardless. The negotiations that follow focus on practical matters: the size of the dowry, the location of the ceremony, the guest list, and the household arrangements all require careful consideration. These discussions provide a welcome distraction from the deeper spiritual issues that divide the prospective spouses. The Egyptian court watches these developments with fascination. The Hebrews' integration into the highest levels of society represents an unprecedented phenomenon. His success has already challenged traditional assumptions about divine favor and foreign wisdom. Now his marriage will test whether cultural synthesis can produce harmony or only create conflict. The famine that Joseph predicted begins to manifest in subtle ways. The Nile's flood arrives slightly lower than expected, the harvest shows signs of stress, and the stored grain takes on new importance. These developments validate the vizier's prophetic gift while creating urgency about the preparations that lie ahead. Asenath's resistance to the marriage grows stronger as the ceremony approaches. She cannot explain her feelings rationally, but something within her spirit rejects the union with increasing intensity. The Hebrews' God seems to demand not just acceptance, but complete transformation, a price she is not prepared to pay. The dreams that begin to trouble her sleep carry messages she cannot interpret. Strange visions of light and darkness, of divine beings and cosmic struggles, fill her nights with images that have no place in Egyptian theology. These nocturnal visitations create fear and confusion that she shares with no one. The final preparations for the wedding ceremony begin as the appointed day approaches. The palace prepares to host the most significant social event of the year, while the Temple of Ra prepares to bless a union that will challenge its fundamental beliefs about the nature of divine truth. Asenath's Conversion, Part 1. The wedding ceremony concludes with all the pageantry befitting a vizier's marriage, but the celebration masks deeper currents of spiritual turmoil. Asenath performs her role with grace and dignity, yet her heart remains divided. The Hebrew husband who now shares her life represents everything she has been taught to fear and reject. The first days of marriage unfold with careful politeness. Joseph and Asenath navigate their new relationship like diplomats from foreign kingdoms, each seeking to understand the other's customs and expectations. They share meals and conversations, but the gulf between their worldviews seems to widen rather than narrow. Joseph's morning prayers create the first significant tension. His practice of addressing the invisible God of his fathers disturbs Asenath's understanding of proper religious observance. She watches him speak to empty air, offering thanksgiving and petition to a deity she cannot see or comprehend. The intensity of his devotion both fascinates and frightens her. The Hebrews' refusal to participate in Egyptian religious ceremonies creates practical complications. As the vizier's wife, Asenath must maintain appearances at court functions and temple festivals. Joseph's absence from these events requires careful explanation and diplomatic management. The situation becomes increasingly uncomfortable for both spouses. The intellectual discussions that develop between them reveal the depth of their differences. Joseph speaks of divine revelation through dreams and visions, of prophetic calling and covenant relationship. Asenath responds with philosophical sophistication about the nature of divine multiplicity and the cosmic order that Egyptian theology describes. Yet beneath these theological debates, personal attraction grows stronger. Joseph's character impresses Asenath despite her resistance to his beliefs. His wisdom in administrative matters, his kindness to servants, his integrity in dealing with difficult situations demonstrate qualities that command respect regardless of religious differences. The crisis comes when Asenath attempts to maintain her traditional religious practices while living in Joseph's household. She arranges for private ceremonies to honor Ra and the other gods, conducting rituals that she believes will preserve her spiritual identity. The effort creates internal conflict that grows more intense with each passing day. The emotional strain of living between two worlds begins to affect her physical health. Sleep becomes elusive, appetite diminishes, and the beauty for which she was famous begins to fade. The servants notice these changes but cannot identify their cause. Asenath herself struggles to understand what is happening to her. The turning point comes when she realizes that her traditional religious practices no longer provide the comfort and meaning they once offered. The familiar prayers feel hollow, the ancient rituals seem empty, and the gods she has served since childhood appear distant and unresponsive. The foundation of her identity begins to crumble. Joseph observes his wife's distress with growing compassion. He recognizes the signs of spiritual struggle, having experienced his own dark nights of the soul during his years of slavery and imprisonment. His approach to her crisis reflects both wisdom and patience, avoiding confrontation while maintaining his own faithfulness. The conversations that develop between them take on new depth and urgency. Asenath begins to ask questions that go beyond intellectual curiosity to personal need. How can Joseph be so certain about his God's existence? How does he maintain faith during difficult circumstances? How can she find the peace that seems to characterize his spiritual life? Joseph's responses draw from his own experience of divine faithfulness. He tells her about the dreams that shaped his youth, the trials that tested his faith, the moments when God's presence became undeniably real. His testimony carries the weight of personal experience rather than theological theory. The resistance that Asenath initially felt toward Hebrew beliefs begins to weaken as she witnesses their fruit in Joseph's life. His confidence in divine providence, his ability to find meaning in suffering, his hope for the future, despite uncertain circumstances, demonstrate the practical value of his faith. The isolation that Asenath experiences in her spiritual struggle drives her to seek solitude. She begins to spend long hours in the tower room that overlooks the palace gardens, wrestling with questions that have no easy answers. The familiar surroundings of her childhood home no longer provide comfort or security. The fasting that she undertakes initially serves traditional religious purposes, but gradually transforms into something deeper. The denial of physical comfort becomes a way of expressing spiritual hunger, a recognition that her soul needs nourishment that Egyptian religion cannot provide. The prayers that she offers begin to change in character. Instead of formal recitations directed to specific deities, she finds herself crying out to whatever divine power might be listening. The sophisticated theology of her education gives way to desperate petition for truth and peace. The dreams that have troubled her sleep since the wedding take on new intensity. The visions of light and darkness, of divine beings and cosmic struggles seem to press for some kind of response. She begins to sense that these nocturnal visitations carry messages that she must either accept or reject. The physical symptoms of her spiritual crisis become impossible to ignore. The weight loss, the sleeplessness, the emotional volatility alarm both Joseph and the household servants. Yet medical treatments prove ineffective because the root cause lies beyond the reach of earthly remedies. The moment of decision approaches like a gathering storm. Asenath realizes that she cannot continue living between two worlds, serving two different understandings of divine reality. The comfortable compromises that she has attempted to maintain are destroying her from within. The choice that faces her carries implications that extend far beyond personal happiness. To embrace Joseph's God means rejecting everything she has been taught about the nature of divine reality. To maintain her traditional beliefs means accepting permanent alienation from her husband and his spiritual world. The courage required for this decision seems beyond her human capacity. The transformation that beckons demands not just intellectual assent, but complete spiritual surrender. The familiar gods of her childhood must be abandoned for an invisible deity who makes demands that terrify her. The tower room becomes her sanctuary as she wrestles with the greatest decision of her life. Here, above the noise and distraction of daily life, she must choose between the security of tradition and the uncertainty of transformation. The outcome will determine not just her own fate, but the future of the family she hopes to build with Joseph. The stage is set for the climactic moment of conversion. In the solitude of her tower chamber, Asenath prepares to encounter the divine in ways that will change her forever. The daughter of Ra's priest stands at the threshold of a new identity, though she cannot yet imagine what lies beyond that threshold. Asenath's Conversion, Part 2. The tower room grows quiet as evening shadows lengthen across the palace grounds. Asenath sits in solitude, her heart heavy with the weight of decision. 7 days of fasting have weakened her body but sharpened her spiritual sensitivity. The moment of divine encounter approaches like dawn after the darkest night. The hunger that gnaws at her stomach pales beside the deeper hunger of her soul. She has tried to satisfy her spiritual needs with Egyptian rituals, with philosophical discussions, with careful compromises between old and new beliefs. Nothing has worked. The emptiness within her demands something more radical than she has been willing to consider. The silence of the chamber seems to pulse with expectancy. Asenath kneels on the stone floor, her hands raised in a gesture that belongs to no particular religious tradition. She speaks to the unknown God of her husband, the invisible deity who has demonstrated such power in Joseph's life. Her prayer begins tentatively, with the hesitation of one approaching a foreign court. She acknowledges her ignorance of proper protocol, her unfamiliarity with Hebrew customs, her uncertainty about how to address a God she cannot see. The words come slowly, each one chosen with care. The confession that follows emerges from depths she has never explored. She admits her emptiness, her spiritual poverty, her inability to find peace through traditional means. The sophisticated theological education that once filled her with pride now seems like elaborate decoration on an empty vessel. The rejection of her ancestral gods proves more difficult than she anticipated. These deities have shaped her identity since childhood. This has provided structure for her understanding of reality, connected her to family and cultural traditions. To abandon them feels like cutting away parts of herself. Yet the conviction grows stronger that she must choose. The God of Joseph demands exclusive allegiance, not the divided loyalty she has attempted to maintain. The comfortable synthesis she has sought proves impossible. She must embrace either the old gods or the new, but not both. The transformation begins subtly, with a sense of presence that fills the empty chamber. Asenath feels herself surrounded by a reality that transcends physical sensation, embraced by love that exceeds human understanding. The invisible God reveals himself through direct spiritual experience rather than theological argument. The light that gradually illuminates the room comes from no earthly source. It seems to emanate from within her own being, as if divine presence were awakening something that has always existed but never been recognized. The radiance grows stronger as her surrender becomes more complete. The divine messenger that appears before her embodies beauty beyond description. The being's form seems to shift between human and angelic, familiar and utterly foreign. The face reflects Joseph's features, but transformed by celestial glory, earthly attractiveness elevated to divine perfection. The voice that speaks carries authority that compels immediate attention. The words come not in Egyptian or Hebrew, but in a language that bypasses the ears and speaks directly to the heart. The message penetrates her consciousness with clarity that admits no doubt or confusion. The angelic announcement declares her transformation already accomplished. She is no longer Asenath the Egyptian, but Asenath the Hebrew, no longer daughter of Potipharah, but daughter of the Most High. The change operates at levels deeper than human decision, divine action that transcends human effort. The honeycomb that the angel presents appears in hands that seem to be made of light itself. The golden substance glows with inner radiance, each cell perfectly formed, the sweetness visible rather than merely tasted. The gift represents divine provision for her spiritual hunger. The invitation to partake carries implications that she understands intuitively. This is not ordinary food, but sacramental nourishment, not physical sustenance, but spiritual communion. To eat means to accept not just divine gift, but divine nature, to become something new rather than merely reformed. The hesitation that she feels reflects the magnitude of the choice. Once she tastes this heavenly food, there can be no return to her former life. The transformation will be complete and irreversible, affecting not just her beliefs, but her very essence. The decision to eat comes from depths beyond rational calculation. Her hand reaches toward the honeycomb with the certainty of one who has found what she has always sought. The sweetness that fills her mouth carries flavors that no earthly food can provide. The physical sensations that accompany her eating seem to confirm the spiritual reality of the transformation. Strength flows through her weakened body, beauty returns to her faded features, and peace settles over her troubled spirit. The divine food accomplishes what human effort could not achieve. The instructions that follow the miraculous feeding provide practical guidance for her new life. She must remove the Egyptian religious objects from her chambers, cease participation in pagan ceremonies, and align herself completely with Hebrew, faith, and practice. The old life must be abandoned entirely. The promise that accompanies these instructions speaks of future blessing beyond imagination. She will become mother to multitudes. Her sons will inherit divine promises, and her transformation will provide a model for others who seek to know the true God. Her personal crisis serves purposes larger than she can understand. The gradual fading of the divine presence leaves her alone, but not abandoned. The memory of the encounter burns within her consciousness like a flame that cannot be extinguished. She has touched eternity and been touched by it, experienced reality at its deepest level. The removal of her Egyptian religious objects becomes an act of worship rather than mere obedience. Each statue, each amulet, each scroll represents a chapter of her life that must be closed. The destruction of these items creates space for new spiritual realities to take root. The bath that she takes after completing this purification serves both practical and symbolic purposes. The water washes away not just physical impurities, but the spiritual residue of her former life. She emerges from the cleansing as a new creation, ready to embrace her transformed identity. The clothing that she chooses reflects her new spiritual status. Instead of the elaborate garments that marked her as a priest's daughter, she selects simple robes that express humility and dedication. The external change mirrors the internal transformation that has taken place. The mirror that reflects her image shows changes that go beyond physical appearance. Her eyes hold depths that speak of divine encounter. Her expression radiates peace that passes understanding, and her bearing suggests authority that comes from spiritual rather than social sources. The night that follows this miraculous day brings the first peaceful sleep she has experienced since her marriage. The dreams that once troubled her rest are replaced by visions of hope and promise. She sleeps like a child who has found her way home after being lost in the wilderness. The dawn that awakens her carries new meaning. The sun that rises over the palace gardens no longer represents the god Ra, but the creation of the true God who has claimed her for his own. The light that illuminates her chamber seems to echo the divine radiance that transformed her life. The preparation for meeting Joseph reflects her new understanding of their relationship. She is no longer the reluctant bride who married for political convenience, but the devoted wife who shares her husband's deepest convictions. The barriers that divided them have been removed by divine intervention. The anticipation that fills her heart speaks of possibilities that extend far beyond personal happiness. Her transformation opens doors to spiritual intimacy that she never imagined possible. The marriage that began as a diplomatic alliance will become a union of souls united in divine purpose. The wedding night. The transformation that has taken place in Asenath's heart shines from her face like morning light on still water. She emerges from her chamber of conversion with grace that speaks of divine encounter, her bearing reflecting the peace that comes from spiritual resolution. The woman who retreated in spiritual crisis returns as a new creation. Joseph observes the change in his wife with wonder and growing recognition. The subtle signs of divine working are familiar to him from his own experience of God's transforming power. Her eyes hold depths that were not there before. Her expression radiates serenity that transcends human explanation. The conversation that unfolds between them carries weight that extends far beyond ordinary marital discussion. Asenath speaks of her encounter with the divine messenger, her rejection of Egyptian gods, her acceptance of Hebrew faith. Each word confirms what Joseph's heart already knows. His wife has been claimed by the same God who called him from prison to palace. The mutual recognition that passes between them creates intimacy that neither had experienced before. They are no longer strangers bound by political necessity, but partners united in divine purpose. The spiritual alignment that has eluded them since their marriage ceremony becomes reality through supernatural intervention. The physical attraction that was always present between them now finds expression in a context of complete spiritual harmony. Beauty takes on new meaning when enhanced by divine radiance, desire becomes sacred when joined to spiritual unity, and love finds its truest expression in the joining of souls committed to the same eternal purposes. The chamber that has witnessed her transformation becomes the setting for their true wedding night. Here, where divine light broke through human darkness, where angelic presence transformed earthly reality, husband and wife discover the intimacy that God intended for marriage from the beginning. The tenderness that characterizes their union reflects both human affection and divine blessing. Joseph approaches his wife with the reverence due to one who has experienced divine visitation, while Asenath responds with the trust of one who has found peace through surrender to divine will. The words they speak to each other carry prophetic weight that neither fully understands. Joseph speaks of the future that God has planned for their family, while Asenath responds with faith that transcends her limited understanding. Their conversation becomes a form of worship, their promises to each other extensions of their commitment to divine purposes. The physical consummation of their marriage takes place in an atmosphere of sacred celebration. The passion that draws them together has been purified by divine fire, transformed from mere biological attraction into an expression of spiritual unity. Their lovemaking becomes a form of prayer, their union a reflection of divine love. The peace that settles over them afterward carries hints of eternity. They rest in each other's arms with the contentment of those who have found their proper place in divine order. The struggles that marked their early marriage seem like distant memories, replaced by harmony that only God can create. The dreams that visit their sleep that night speak of future blessing beyond imagination. They see visions of sons who will carry divine promises, of tribes that will emerge from their union, of influence that will extend far beyond their own lifetimes. Their personal happiness serves purposes that transcend individual fulfillment. The morning that follows brings new understanding of their roles in God's plan. Joseph's elevation to vizier of Egypt creates opportunities for divine purposes to unfold through political power. Asenath's transformation from Egyptian priestess to Hebrew matriarch enables the joining of nations through spiritual unity. The household that awakens to this new reality must adjust to changes that go beyond the obvious. The servants observe the transformation in their mistress with curiosity and respect, recognizing that something significant has occurred, even if they cannot fully understand its nature. The religious practices that will now characterize their home create both opportunities and challenges. Joseph's morning prayers can now include his wife's participation, while Asenath's spiritual hunger finds satisfaction in Hebrew worship. The unity they achieve in spiritual matters provides a foundation for every other aspect of their relationship. The political implications of Asenath's conversion remain hidden from public view, but their significance will unfold over time. The daughter of Potiphar's allegiance to the Hebrew god creates connections between Joseph's administration and Egyptian society that will prove crucial during the coming famine. The love that has blossomed between them operates on multiple levels simultaneously: physical attraction, emotional compatibility, intellectual stimulation, and spiritual unity combine to create a relationship that reflects divine intention for marriage. Their union becomes a model for others who seek to bridge different cultures and traditions. The challenges that lie ahead will test the strength of their bond, but the foundation established through divine intervention provides security that human effort alone could never achieve. They face the future with confidence that comes from knowing their marriage serves purposes greater than personal happiness. The palace that houses their transformed relationship becomes a place where heaven and earth meet. The presence of two people united in divine purpose creates an atmosphere that influences everyone who enters their domain. Their home becomes a sanctuary where God's will can be accomplished through human cooperation. The court that observes their marriage sees evidence of divine blessing in the harmony that characterizes their relationship. The union that began as a political alliance has become a love story that testifies to the power of divine grace to transform human hearts. The future that stretches before them holds promises and trials in equal measure. The famine that Joseph predicted will test their faith and their love, while the sons that will be born to them will carry forward the divine purposes that brought them together. The legacy that their union will create extends far beyond their own lifetimes. The tribes that will emerge from their descendants will carry the memory of their love story through generations, testifying to the power of divine grace to unite hearts, bridge cultures, and accomplish eternal purposes through human relationships. The wedding night that concludes their journey from arranged marriage to spiritual union represents more than personal fulfillment. It marks the beginning of a new chapter in the story of God's people, a chapter that will be written through the love of two hearts united in divine purpose. Life at court. The palace awakens each morning to the sound of Joseph's prayers, Hebrew words of thanksgiving that echo through corridors designed for Egyptian ceremonies. Asenath's voice joins his now, their harmonized worship, creating a sanctuary of divine presence within the seat of earthly power. The transformation of the vizier's household ripples through the entire court structure. The daily routine that governs their lives reflects the unique position they occupy in Egyptian society. Joseph's administrative duties require his presence in the throne room, the treasury, and the grain storage facilities that dot the kingdom. Asenath's responsibilities as the vizier's wife involve her in court ceremonies, diplomatic entertainments, and the complex social networks that bind the ruling elite together. The famine that Joseph predicted begins to manifest in subtle ways that only the trained eye can detect. The Nile's flood arrives slightly lower than expected, the harvest yields show marginal decreases, and the stored grain takes on new significance. The 7 years of abundance give way to the lean years that will test every aspect of Joseph's preparation. The administrative challenges that arise from managing Egypt's response to the crisis showcase Joseph's divine wisdom. Distribution systems must be refined, rationing protocols established, and diplomatic relations maintained with neighboring kingdoms that face similar shortages. The Hebrew vizier's reputation for wisdom spreads throughout the ancient world. Asenath's role in court functions requires careful navigation of religious and cultural sensitivities. Her conversion to Hebrew faith remains a private matter, but her changed priorities create subtle tensions in social situations. She must attend temple ceremonies without participating in the worship, maintain friendships with priestesses while rejecting their beliefs. The pregnancy that soon blesses their marriage creates joy that extends beyond personal happiness. The news of the vizier's heir spreads through the palace like morning light, bringing hope for the future and validation of divine blessing on their union. The court that once viewed their marriage with skepticism now sees evidence of divine favor. The birth of Manasseh marks a new chapter in their family story. Joseph's choice of name reflects his gratitude for God's faithfulness in helping him forget the pain of his past. The Hebrew name given to the son of an Egyptian mother symbolizes the cultural synthesis that their marriage represents. The courtly education that Asenath ensures for her son reflects her own transformation of understanding. She teaches him both Hebrew and Egyptian languages, both biblical and classical literature, both monotheistic and historical religious concepts. The child's education becomes a bridge between two worlds. The political dynamics of the court create both opportunities and challenges for the Hebrew vizier's family. Some nobles view Joseph's success with admiration and seek to ally themselves with his rising influence. Others harbor resentment about the foreigner's elevation and look for ways to undermine his authority. The economic policies that Joseph implements during the famine demonstrate both practical wisdom and divine guidance. The stored grain is distributed according to carefully calculated ratios, ensuring that Egypt's people survive while maintaining reserves for the worst years ahead. The kingdom's prosperity during crisis amazes neighboring nations. The international delegations that arrive seeking relief from the famine provide opportunities for Joseph to demonstrate both administrative competence and Hebrew faithfulness. Representatives from kingdoms throughout the ancient world witness the prosperity that divine wisdom has brought to Egypt. The birth of Ephraim adds to the family's joy while deepening its significance in divine history. Joseph's choice of name reflects his gratitude for God's faithfulness in making him fruitful in the land of his affliction. The second son completes the foundation of what will become two of Israel's most important tribes. The domestic happiness that characterizes their household creates a stark contrast to the suffering that the famine brings to other families. Joseph and Asenath's love continues to deepen as they share the challenges of raising children and managing their complex responsibilities within the Egyptian court. The religious instruction that they provide for their sons reflects the unique synthesis of cultures that their marriage represents. The boys learn Hebrew scriptures and Egyptian literature, Jewish customs and courtly etiquette, monotheistic faith, and administrative skills. Their education prepares them for roles that transcend cultural boundaries. The social position that Asenath maintains as the vizier's wife requires constant attention to protocol and precedent. She must honor Egyptian customs while maintaining Hebrew convictions, support her husband's policies while building her own networks of influence, and prepare for a future that remains uncertain despite divine promises. The palace intrigue that swirls around Joseph's position intensifies as the famine deepens. Some courtiers recognize that crisis creates opportunities for advancement, while others fear that the Hebrews' influence threatens traditional Egyptian values. The political tensions create undercurrents that affect every aspect of court life. The wisdom that Joseph displays in managing both administrative and personal challenges establishes him as indispensable to Egypt's survival. His ability to maintain Hebrew faith while serving Egyptian interests demonstrates the possibility of cultural synthesis without compromise of core convictions. The love story that continues to unfold between Joseph and Asenath provides stability amid the chaos of crisis management. Their mutual support, shared faith, and growing family create a foundation of strength that enables them to face whatever challenges lie ahead. The prosperity that Egypt maintains during the early years of famine validates Joseph's prophetic gift and administrative skill. The kingdom that prepared for crisis under divine guidance experiences abundance, while neighboring nations face starvation. The Hebrew vizier's reputation for wisdom spreads throughout the ancient world. The children who grow up in the palace witness firsthand the integration of Hebrew faith with Egyptian culture. Manasseh and Ephraim learn to navigate both worlds with ease, their comfort in diverse settings preparing them for roles that will bridge different peoples and traditions. The legacy that Joseph and Asenath create through their faithful service extends far beyond their own lifetimes. Their example of successful cultural synthesis, their model of faith under pressure, and their demonstration of divine blessing on mixed marriages will inspire generations of believers who face similar challenges. The court that observes their marriage sees practical evidence of divine blessing on those who honor God's purposes. The Hebrew vizier's household becomes a testimony to the power of faith to transform relationships, bridge cultures, and accomplish eternal purposes through human cooperation. The future that stretches before them holds both promise and peril. The remaining years of famine will test their faith and their love, while the divine purposes that brought them together will continue to unfold through their descendants. Their life at court serves as preparation for roles in divine history that neither fully understands. The Assassination Plot, Part 1. The palace corridors whisper with secrets that grow more dangerous as the famine deepens. Among the courtiers who once viewed Joseph's elevation with mere curiosity, darker sentiments now take root. The Hebrew vizier's success during crisis has created both admiration and resentment, both grateful allies and bitter enemies. The son of Pharaoh moves through these corridors with the confidence of one born to power, yet his position carries burdens that breed frustration. The crown prince who expected to inherit unchallenged authority now finds himself overshadowed by a foreign administrator whose wisdom exceeds his own. The desire that kindles in the prince's heart when he observes Asenath goes beyond simple attraction. Her beauty, enhanced by divine radiance, captivates him completely. Her grace, refined by spiritual transformation, makes other women seem crude by comparison. Her status as the vizier's wife makes her both forbidden and irresistible. The observations that the prince makes during court functions reveal the depth of his growing obsession. He watches Asenath's interactions with other courtiers, studies her expressions during ceremonies, and memorizes her words during public conversations. His attention becomes so focused that others begin to notice his preoccupation. The rationalization that develops in his mind transforms desire into perceived right. As Pharaoh's son, he tells himself he deserves the finest woman in the kingdom. As future ruler, he claims authority over all his subjects' possessions. As an Egyptian, he questions whether a Hebrew deserves such a prize. The corruption that begins to influence his thinking threads like poison through his understanding of justice and morality. The prince who once respected Joseph's wisdom now sees only obstacles to his desires. The administrator who preserved Egypt during crisis becomes an enemy to be eliminated. The allies that the prince seeks for his dark purpose exist among the courtiers who harbor their own grievances against Joseph's administration. Some resent the Hebrew's foreign origins, others envy his rapid advancement, and still others fear that his influence threatens traditional Egyptian values. The general who commands the palace guard provides the military expertise that the plot requires. His loyalty to the crown prince outweighs his respect for the vizier. His ambition exceeds his conscience, and his skills make him a formidable ally in any conspiracy. The meetings that take place in shadowed chambers of the palace develop strategies that grow more elaborate and dangerous. The conspirators understand that removing Joseph requires careful planning, perfect timing, and absolute secrecy. Discovery would mean not just failure, but destruction for everyone involved. The psychological profile that emerges from these plotting sessions reveals men driven by various motives. The prince acts from lust and entitlement, the general from ambition and opportunism, the courtiers from resentment and fear. Their different reasons for opposing Joseph create both strength and weakness in their alliance. The timeline that the conspirators establish reflects their understanding of palace routine and security arrangements. They identify opportunities when Joseph travels outside the capital, moments when his guard detail is reduced, and situations where his unliving could appear accidental. The methods that they consider range from direct assault to subtle poison, from staged accidents to open rebellion. Each approach carries advantages and risks that must be weighed against their ultimate goals. The decision they reach reflects both their capabilities and their desperation. The intelligence gathering that supports their planning requires careful observation of Joseph's daily routine. The conspirators note his meeting schedules, his travel patterns, his security arrangements, and his personal habits. The information they collect provides the foundation for their attack strategy. The moral degradation that accompanies their plotting affects each conspirator differently. The prince's sense of entitlement grows stronger with each meeting, while the general's tactical thinking becomes increasingly ruthless. The courtiers find themselves drawn deeper into corruption than they initially intended. The secrecy that surrounds their activities creates an atmosphere of tension and paranoia. Each conspirator fears discovery, suspects betrayal, and questions the loyalty of his allies. The bonds that unite them prove fragile when tested by the pressure of maintaining their deception. The divine protection that surrounds Joseph and his family operates through both supernatural and natural means. Dreams warn of danger, circumstances create delays, and human agents provide unexpected intelligence. The hand of God works to preserve those who serve his purposes. The loyal servants who remain faithful to Joseph's household begin to notice subtle changes in palace atmosphere. Conversations stop when they enter rooms. Certain courtiers avoid eye contact, and the normal patterns of court life show signs of disruption. The spiritual battle that rages beneath the surface of palace politics reflects the cosmic conflict between good and evil. The forces that oppose God's purposes work through human agents to destroy those who serve divine will. The stakes extend far beyond personal ambition to eternal significance. The trap that the conspirators prepare requires Asenath's participation, though she remains unaware of their intentions. They plan to use her trust, her compassion, and her social obligations to place her in a position where she can be taken without raising immediate alarm. The timing that they choose coincides with a period when Joseph's administrative duties require extended absence from the capital. The famine's demands create opportunities for the conspirators to act without immediate discovery of their plot. The weapons that they gather for their assault reflect their determination to succeed at any cost. The violence they plan exceeds what simple removal of Joseph would require, suggesting that their corruption has progressed beyond rational calculation. The final preparations that mark the approach of their planned attack create tension that affects the entire court. The conspirators struggle to maintain normal appearances while preparing for actions that will transform their lives forever. The warnings that reach Joseph through various sources create awareness of danger without revealing its specific nature. The divine protection that surrounds him provides enough information to heighten vigilance without exposing the full scope of the threat. The stage is set for confrontation that will test the strength of divine protection against human evil. The plot that threatens Joseph's life and Asenath's virtue represents more than personal danger. It embodies the eternal conflict between those who serve God's purposes and those who oppose them. The day approaches when the conspirators will act, when their months of planning will either succeed or fail, when the divine protection that surrounds Joseph's household will face its greatest test. The outcome will determine not just the fate of individuals, but the future of God's purposes in Egypt. The silence that precedes the storm creates an atmosphere of expectation that affects everyone in the palace. Those who serve evil purposes prepare for victory, Desha, while those who serve divine will trust in protection that transcends human understanding. The dawn that will bring the crisis rises over a palace divided between those who plot destruction and those who trust in divine preservation. The coming day will reveal whether human evil or divine purpose proves stronger in the eternal struggle for truth and justice. The Assassination Plot, Part 2. Night hung heavy over Egypt. The moon floated pale and thin, its light barely brushing the palace walls. In the upper chambers, Asenath stood by a small window. The air was still. Somewhere below, a torch crackled. Somewhere far beyond, the Nile whispered against its banks. She had been summoned. A message slipped to her in the late hours, calling her to the gardens. Pharaoh's son wished to speak. He claimed it was urgent. Her heart had tightened at the words, but duty tugged at her feet. She told herself, Joseph's position made them both targets of whispers and requests. She had weathered worse. She would face this too. Wrapping herself in a dark cloak, Asenath moved through the quiet halls. Statues of the gods watched as she passed. Her sandals made the faintest sound on the cool stone. She felt the weight of her necklace, the lion pendant Joseph had given her, pressed near her heart. Outside, the gardens stretched in silver and shadow. Papyrus rustled softly, stirred by a breeze that seemed to rise only when she stepped among them. Asenath paused. The place felt too still. No servants waited, no guards stood near, only the moon and the hush of leaves. A figure stepped out from the columns. Pharaoh's son. His face was smooth, his smile sharp. He bowed low, but his eyes flicked behind her. Asenath felt a prickle down her back. She turned and saw movement. Shapes sliding from the dark, men cloaked in shadow. Her breath caught. This was no conversation. This was no plea. For a heartbeat, Asenath froze. Her mind raced. She had no weapon, no escort, no escape, but something deep within, a voice older than fear, rose to the surface. Run. The night burst open. She turned, the cloak slipping from her shoulders, sandals pounding against the path, heart pounding against her ribs. Behind, shouts tore through the stillness. Hands grasped, stones scattered. She darted between walls of stone and hedge, feet skimming over the earth. In the maze of the gardens, moonlight wove bright threads between shadows. Asenath ran blind. Yet, the path seemed to open before her. A turn to the right, a narrow passage. A low arch she ducked beneath just in time. Behind, the sounds shifted. Curses, the sharp scrape of sandals slipping, the stumble of those too sure they would catch her. Her lungs burned. Her throat ached for breath. But she ran on. And then, just as her strength began to fray, a light rose before her, soft, golden, and strange. It came not from torches, nor from the moon, but from the air itself. Asenath stumbled, her feet slowing, her eyes wide. In the clearing stood a figure, cloaked in light, not cloth, the shape of a man, yet not of this world. His face was a glow she could not look upon, his hands lifted in a silent command. The pursuers stopped. Not one dared cross the line of radiance drawn across the earth. Asenath sank to her knees. A great hush fell over the night. She could hear her own breath, the wild beat of her heart. She could hear the wind sighing through the papyrus. The figure moved and the air shivered with peace. In that moment, strength flowed back into her. But it was not the strength of flesh. It was the quiet, steady courage of the soul. The knowledge that she was seen, that she was not alone. The men in the dark fell back as if pushed by a hand unseen. Pharaoh's son stood frozen, his face pale, his plan undone. And then, as softly as it had come, the light faded. The figure was gone. The night folded once more around her. But Asenath was no longer running. She rose, lifting her chin, her breath slowing, her heart settling. She turned, walking past the men who had waited to see her undone. No one reached for her now. No one met her gaze. They parted, stepping aside as if the light had marked her with something they could no longer touch. Back inside the palace, Asenath crossed the silent halls. The lion pendant touched her skin, warm as if it had drunk the sun. She walked not as a woman saved by luck, but as one transformed. Not by escape alone, but by the quiet power that had met her in the dark. In the days that followed, the whispers faded. Pharaoh's son grew careful. Joseph said little, but his eyes held a knowing glance when they met hers. She spoke to no one of the figure in the garden. Some things lived beyond words. Yet something had shifted. Asenath carried it in her walk, in the way she stood, in the way she listened. She had faced the shadow, not with sword or shield, but with trust, and in that trust she had been given back to herself. At night, when the torches dimmed and the hush of the Nile filled the rooms, Asenath would sit by the window. She watched the river bend under the moon, watched the stars drift like lanterns across the dark, and in her quiet heart she carried a flame no hand could seize. The garden waited, but no one called her there again. The night waited, but its fear had lost its hold. And Asenath, the foreign bride, the convert, the lioness, moved through the palace with a grace that came not from her title, but from the night she had been tested and had not fallen. The Assassination Plot, Part 2. The trap springs with silent precision. Asenath finds herself drawn into the palace gardens by a message claiming urgent need. The moon hangs low over Memphis, casting long shadows between the date palms. She moves through the courtyards with careful steps, her sandals whispering against the stone. Pharaoh's son waits in the darkness. His companions emerge from behind pillars and archways, their faces hidden beneath linen wraps. The air grows thick with danger. Asenath's breath catches as she realizes the deception. These men carry bronze blades that gleam in the moonlight. The prince steps forward, his voice soft but filled with menace. He speaks of his desire, his plans to claim her once Joseph lies cold in the desert. His words paint a picture of power and possession. Asenath stands frozen, her mind racing through possibilities of escape. The first attack comes swift and silent. A blade arcs through the air toward her shoulder. At that moment, something extraordinary happens. The darkness around her begins to shift and change. A presence fills the garden, invisible yet unmistakable. The assassin's blade turns aside as if deflected by an unseen hand. Asenath moves with sudden grace, her feet finding paths between her attackers. The divine protection that surrounds her becomes a shield of light. The men stumble and fall, their weapons clattering uselessly to the ground. Their confidence crumbles as they witness powers beyond their understanding. She runs through the palace corridors, her heart pounding like temple drums. Behind her, the conspirators struggle to comprehend what they have witnessed. Some flee into the night, abandoning their prince and his failing plot. Others stand transfixed, staring at the space where Asenath disappeared. The chase leads through hidden passages and forgotten chambers. Asenath's knowledge of the palace serves her well. She knows every secret door, every narrow stair that leads to safety. The goddess-like strength that flows through her limbs carries her beyond the reach of mortal danger. Dawn breaks over the Nile as she reaches Joseph's chambers. Her husband sees the terror in her eyes, the torn fabric of her robes. His face darkens with understanding. The political game has turned deadly. The foreign vizier and his Egyptian wife have become targets of a conspiracy that reaches to the highest levels of power. Joseph's response comes swift and decisive. He summons his most trusted guards, men who have served him faithfully since his rise to power. Messages fly across the city like birds of prey. The pharaoh himself must learn of his son's betrayal. The delicate balance of the kingdom hangs in the balance. The aftermath brings changes that ripple through the court. Pharaoh's son finds himself stripped of privilege and power. His conspirators face exile or worse. The old king's face shows the weight of a father's disappointment. Trust, once broken, proves difficult to rebuild. Asenath emerges from the ordeal transformed yet again. The frightened woman who ran through dark corridors has become something new. She carries within her the certainty of divine protection. The gods of Egypt could not save her, but the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob proved mighty indeed. Her marriage to Joseph deepens through shared danger. They have faced the ultimate test of loyalty and survived. The bond between them grows stronger than political alliance. Love, tested by fire, emerges purified and unbreakable. The people of Egypt whisper of miracles in the palace gardens. Some say the gods themselves walked among the date palms that night. Others speak of foreign magic and Hebrew spells. The truth remains hidden in the hearts of those who witnessed the divine intervention. Asenath's reputation spreads beyond the palace walls. She becomes known as a woman touched by the divine, protected by forces beyond mortal understanding. Her story inspires other women who find themselves caught between cultures and loyalties. The assassination plot marks a turning point in her journey. No longer does she doubt her place in the Hebrew faith. The God who saved her from bronze blades has claimed her as his own. Her conversion, begun in tears and honey, finds completion in the crucible of mortal danger. Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. The chambers of Asenath fill with new sounds. Infant cries echo through the palace halls, bringing joy after seasons of political tension. Two sons arrive within the span of 3 years, each carrying the promise of future greatness. Their names reflect Joseph's journey from slavery to power. Manasseh, the firstborn, receives his name with deep meaning. God has made me forget all my hardship, Joseph declares as he holds the child. The baby's dark eyes mirror his mother's Egyptian heritage, yet his features carry the strong jaw of his Hebrew father. In his small form, two nations find their meeting place. Ephraim follows, his birth bringing even greater celebration. God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction, Joseph whispers over the second son. This child seems to glow with inner light, his movements quick and purposeful even in infancy. The servants speak in hushed tones of his unusual beauty. Asenath watches her sons with wonder and concern. They represent something unprecedented in the ancient world. Half Hebrew, half Egyptian, they belong fully to neither culture, yet inherit the best of both. Their future lies shrouded in mystery and possibility. The boys grow under their mother's careful guidance. She teaches them the mysteries of Egyptian wisdom, while Joseph shares the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They learn hieroglyphs and Hebrew letters with equal skill. Their minds absorb knowledge like desert sand drinks rain. Palace life shapes their early years. They play in gardens where their mother once fled from assassins. They learn to read the stars from Egyptian astronomers while memorizing the promises given to their Hebrew ancestors. Their education blends sacred and secular, east and west. Manasseh shows early signs of leadership. He commands attention in any room, his voice carrying authority even in childhood. The Egyptian nobles see in him a future ally, someone who understands their ways. Yet his heart beats with Hebrew rhythm, stirred by stories of the Promised Land. Ephraim displays different gifts. His sensitivity to spiritual matters amazes both parents. He speaks of dreams and visions that seem to come from divine sources. The priests of Av-On watch him carefully, recognizing something familiar yet foreign in his spiritual awareness. The brothers' relationship develops with natural complexity. Manasseh, as the elder, expects deference and respect. Ephraim, blessed with unusual insight, often sees beyond his brother's immediate concerns. Their disagreements mirror the larger tensions between their dual heritage. Asenath guides them through the maze of palace politics. She teaches them when to speak and when to remain silent. Her own experience of navigating between cultures proves invaluable. The boys learn to read faces, to understand the subtle languages of power and influence. Joseph's love for his sons knows no bounds. He sees in them the fulfillment of God's promise to make him fruitful. Yet he also recognizes the challenges they will face. Their mixed heritage may prove both blessing and burden in the years to come. The Egyptian court watches the boys with interest and concern. Some see them as bridges between Hebrew and Egyptian power. Others view them as threats to traditional order. Their very existence challenges long-held assumptions about bloodline and belonging. Religious instruction becomes a daily priority. Asenath shares her testimony of conversion, the story of honey and angels that changed her heart. The boys listen with wide eyes. understanding that their mother's journey mirrors their own complex identity. The servants whisper predictions about the brothers' future. Some say Manasseh will rule Egypt alongside his father. Others believe Ephraim possesses gifts that will reshape the spiritual landscape. The palace buzzes with speculation and hope. As the boys approach their fifth and seventh years, their personalities become distinct. Manasseh gravitates toward administrative duties, following Joseph through the granaries and tax offices. Ephraim finds himself drawn to the temple courts, asking questions that perplex the priests. Their mother's influence remains paramount. She instills in them respect for both cultures while maintaining loyalty to the Hebrew God. The delicate balance she maintains serves as a model for their own future choices. The legacy of Asenath and Joseph begins to take shape through their sons. These boys carry within their veins the hopes of two peoples. Their story has only begun, yet already the threads of destiny begin to weave themselves into the larger tapestry of Israel's future. Asenath's role in Israelite identity. The question echoes through centuries of theological debate. How does an Egyptian woman become the mother of two Israelite tribes? Her story challenges traditional notions of bloodline and belonging. The answer lies not in genealogy, but in the mysterious workings of divine providence. Asenath's position in Israelite identity begins with her marriage to Joseph. The union creates more than personal happiness. It forges a link between Egypt and Israel that will endure for generations. Her acceptance into the Hebrew faith transforms her from foreign woman to covenant mother. The transformation goes deeper than mere conversion. Through her spiritual journey, Asenath embodies the principle that faith transcends ethnic boundaries. Her story becomes a testament to the inclusive nature of God's promises. Bloodline matters less than heartline in the divine economy. Her sons represent the fulfillment of this principle. Manasseh and Ephraim receive equal standing with their uncles, the sons of Jacob. They inherit not just blessing, but tribal identity. Their mother's foreign birth becomes irrelevant to their covenant status. The adoption ceremony marks a pivotal moment. Jacob, now Israel, places his hands on his grandsons' heads. The old patriarch's words carry prophetic weight. The angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys, he declares. In that moment, Asenath's sons become Israel's sons. The blessing that follows reveals divine priorities. Jacob crosses his hands, placing his right hand on Ephraim's head despite Manasseh's birthright. The younger brother receives the greater blessing. This reversal of natural order reflects God's frequent choice of the unexpected. Asenath watches the ceremony with profound emotion. Her boys, born in Egyptian palaces, receive the blessing of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The promise made to their great-grandfather now flows through them to future generations. Her marriage to Joseph has become a channel of divine purpose. The theological implications ripple through Scripture. Asenath's story establishes precedent for foreign women entering the covenant community. Ruth the Moabite and Rahab the Canaanite follow paths she helped create. Her example demonstrates that faith, not birth, determines covenant membership. The tribal inheritance of Ephraim and Manasseh further confirms this principle. They receive portions of the promised land equal to any other tribe. Their mother's Egyptian heritage poses no obstacle to their Israelite destiny. Geography of birth yields to geography of faith. Her role extends beyond motherhood to mentorship. Asenath's journey from pagan princess to covenant mother serves as a template for others. Her story shows that radical transformation remains possible regardless of background or previous religious commitment. The apocryphal literature amplifies this theme. The text of Joseph and Asenath presents her conversion as a model for all nations. Her spiritual journey becomes an allegory for humanity's movement from darkness to light. The Egyptian princess represents every soul seeking divine truth. Rabbinic interpretation adds another layer of meaning. Some traditions identify Asenath as the daughter of Dinah, making her secretly Hebrew by birth. This theory attempts to preserve ethnic purity while acknowledging her crucial role. Yet, the simpler explanation, divine grace transcending human categories, proves more profound. The Christian tradition embraces Asenath's story with enthusiasm. Early church fathers see in her conversion a prefiguring of Gentile inclusion in God's kingdom. Her marriage to Joseph becomes a symbol of Christ's union with the church. Her sons represent the fruit of that sacred alliance. Modern scholarship recognizes the revolutionary nature of her story. In a world obsessed with bloodline and ethnic purity, Asenath represents radical inclusion. Her acceptance into Israel's family structure challenges contemporary assumptions about identity and belonging. The feminist interpretation adds yet another dimension. Asenath's agency in her own conversion story stands out in ancient literature. She chooses her spiritual path rather than having it imposed upon her. Her transformation comes through personal encounter with the divine, not through male authority. Her legacy continues through her son's tribal inheritance. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh become among the most powerful in Israel's history. Their mother's foreign birth becomes a source of strength rather than weakness. Diversity enriches rather than threatens the covenant community. The northern kingdom of Israel later centers on Ephraim's territory. The younger son's blessing fulfills itself in political reality. Asenath's influence extends through generations, shaping the destiny of an entire nation. Her story proves that God's plans often unfold through unexpected channels. Asenath in rabbinic and Christian tradition. The ancient rabbis struggled with Asenath's story. Her foreign birth troubled scholars committed to maintaining Israel's ethnic purity. Their creative solutions reveal both theological sophistication and cultural anxiety. The tension between inclusion and exclusion shapes their interpretations. One tradition makes Asenath the daughter of Dinah, Jacob's only named daughter. According to this account, Dinah's assault by Shechem resulted in pregnancy. The infant, sent away to Egypt for protection, grows up as Potipharah's adopted daughter. This theory preserves Hebrew bloodline while explaining Asenath's presence in Egypt. The story requires elaborate construction. Dinah allegedly gives birth in secret, then entrusts her daughter to divine protection. An angel carries the infant to Egypt, where Potipharah finds and adopts her. The tale transforms Asenath from foreign convert to hidden Hebrew, solving the rabbi's theological dilemma. Other rabbinic sources take different approaches. Some emphasize divine foreknowledge, suggesting God predestined Asenath's conversion. Her Egyptian birth serves divine purposes, preparing her for her crucial role in Israel's future. This interpretation places her story within the broader framework of divine providence. The mystical tradition adds layers of meaning. Kabbalistic texts describe Asenath as a holy soul trapped in pagan surroundings. Her conversion represents the liberation of divine sparks from material imprisonment. This interpretation transforms her personal story into cosmic allegory. Medieval Jewish commentators continue the debate. Some accept her foreign birth while emphasizing her sincere conversion. Others maintain the Dinah connection, unwilling to compromise on ethnic purity. The discussion reveals ongoing tensions between particularism and universalism in Jewish thought. The Christian tradition approaches Asenath with different concerns. Early church fathers see in her story a prefiguring of Gentile conversion. Her journey from paganism to faith mirrors the church's mission to all nations. Her marriage to Joseph symbolizes Christ's union with his bride, the church. Patristic literature emphasizes her spiritual transformation. Church fathers describe her conversion in terms reminiscent of Christian baptism. The angel's visit parallels the Holy Spirit's work in Christian conversion. Her new identity reflects the new creation available through faith. The apocryphal text of Joseph and Asenath gains particular popularity in Christian circles. Its emphasis on spiritual transformation resonates with Christian themes of rebirth and renewal. The story's allegorical potential appeals to theologians seeking Old Testament types of New Testament realities. Medieval Christian art frequently depicts Asenath's story. Illuminated manuscripts show her conversion scene, complete with angelic visitation and miraculous honeycomb. Her beauty and piety serve as models for Christian women. The visual tradition helps preserve her story for future generations. The Eastern Orthodox tradition develops its own interpretation. Byzantine theologians see in Asenath a model of theosis, the process of becoming like God. Her transformation from pagan princess to covenant mother illustrates humanity's potential for divine participation. Her story becomes a manual for spiritual ascent. Protestant reformers rediscover Asenath's story during the Renaissance. Their emphasis on personal faith over institutional authority resonates with her individual conversion experience. Her direct encounter with the divine appeals to reformed sensibilities about unmediated religious experience. The Counter-Reformation brings renewed Catholic interest in her story. Jesuit scholars develop elaborate allegorical interpretations, seeing in her conversion a model for missionary work. Her transformation from paganism to faith illustrates the Church's civilizing mission. The story serves apologetic purposes in an age of religious conflict. Modern Jewish scholarship approaches Asenath with renewed interest. Contemporary scholars recognize her story's importance for understanding ancient attitudes toward conversion and intermarriage. Her narrative provides insight into the development of Jewish identity in the Hellenistic period. Feminist scholars from both traditions find in Asenath a compelling figure. Her agency in her own conversion story challenges patriarchal assumptions about women's spiritual capacity. Her theological sophistication, demonstrated in her dialogues with the angel, suggests female religious authority rarely acknowledged in ancient texts. The interfaith dialogue movement embraces Asenath's story as a model for religious encounter. Her respectful engagement with foreign traditions while maintaining core convictions offers guidance for contemporary religious pluralism. Her story suggests that conversion need not require cultural annihilation. Contemporary literature continues to explore her story. Modern novels, poems, and plays reimagine her life for new audiences. Her struggle with identity and belonging resonates with contemporary concerns about multiculturalism and religious diversity. The Ancient Princess speaks to modern questions about faith and identity. Lost texts and rediscoveries. The manuscript appears in a Paris library during the 19th century. Scholars examine the Greek text with growing excitement. They recognize immediately that this document contains something extraordinary. The story of Joseph and Asenath emerges from centuries of obscurity, bringing with it new understanding of ancient religious thought. The discovery sparks intense scholarly debate. Some experts date the text to the 1st century, making it contemporary with early Christian writings. Others argue for later composition, perhaps during the 3rd or 4th centuries. The evidence remains frustratingly ambiguous, leaving room for multiple interpretations. The text's origins prove equally mysterious. Some scholars propose Jewish authorship, pointing to detailed knowledge of Hebrew traditions and customs. Others argue for Christian composition, citing theological themes that echo New Testament writings. The question remains unresolved, adding to the document's intrigue. The manuscript tradition reveals complex transmission history. Multiple versions exist in various languages, each containing unique elements. The Greek text differs significantly from later Latin and Syriac translations. These variations suggest active scribal engagement with the story, each copyist adding personal touches. The rediscovery transforms understanding of ancient literature. Previously, scholars knew Asenath only from brief biblical references. The expanded narrative reveals a sophisticated theological mind at work. The text demonstrates that ancient writers possessed remarkable psychological insight and literary skill. The story's structure follows classical patterns while incorporating distinctly religious elements. The author draws on Greek Romantic literature, Egyptian wisdom traditions, and Hebrew religious thought. This synthesis creates something unprecedented in ancient literature, a truly multicultural religious romance. The symbolism throughout the text operates on multiple levels. The tower where Asenath retreats represents both physical isolation and spiritual ascent. The honeycomb that appears during her conversion carries meanings related to wisdom, divine speech, and spiritual nourishment. Every element serves both narrative and theological purposes. The manuscript's preservation raises questions about readership and purpose. Someone valued this text enough to copy and preserve it through centuries of potential loss. The careful attention to detail in the best manuscripts suggests communities that treasured these stories. Yet the identity of these communities remains unclear. The discovery influences broader understanding of ancient religious literature. The text demonstrates that conversion narratives existed long before Christianity made them commonplace. The sophisticated treatment of spiritual transformation suggests that ancient religious thought was more nuanced than previously recognized. The dating controversy affects interpretation significantly. If the text predates Christianity, it provides evidence for Jewish missionary activity and interest in Gentile conversion. If it postdates Christian origins, it might represent Jewish response to Christian expansion. The stakes of the scholarly debate extend beyond academic interest. The geographical references in the text provide clues about its origins. The detailed knowledge of Egyptian customs and locations suggests firsthand familiarity with the region. The author demonstrates intimate knowledge of palace protocol, religious ritual, and political structure. This precision points to Egyptian Jewish or Egyptian Christian authorship. The theological sophistication impresses modern readers. The text grapples with fundamental questions about divine revelation, religious conversion, and spiritual transformation. The author's treatment of these themes demonstrates remarkable theological maturity. The work deserves recognition as a significant contribution to ancient religious thought. The manuscript's survival through medieval periods suggests continuing relevance. Scribes would not have invested time and materials in copying texts without perceived value. The story apparently spoke to concerns that transcended its original historical context. Its themes of transformation and divine encounter resonated across centuries. The rediscovery impacts biblical scholarship significantly. The text provides new perspective on Old Testament narratives, offering alternative versions of familiar stories. These variations help scholars understand how ancient communities interpreted and transmitted religious traditions. The text becomes a window into ancient religious imagination. The influence on contemporary religious thought proves substantial. The story's emphasis on personal religious experience appeals to modern sensibilities. Its treatment of interfaith marriage and religious conversion speaks to contemporary concerns. The ancient text finds new relevance in modern contexts. The scholarly apparatus surrounding the text continues to grow. New translations appear regularly, each offering fresh insights into the story's meaning. Commentaries explore the text's historical, literary, and theological dimensions. The rediscovered manuscript generates an entire field of academic inquiry. The preservation challenges facing the manuscript require ongoing attention. The ancient materials deteriorate despite careful conservation efforts. Digital preservation projects ensure that the text remains accessible to future scholars. The technology that aids modern research also helps preserve ancient wisdom. The interdisciplinary nature of research on this text reflects modern scholarly approaches. Historians, theologians, literary critics, and archaeologists collaborate in understanding the manuscript's significance. Their combined efforts reveal the text's complexity and continuing relevance. Love, politics, and allegory. The love story between Joseph and Asenath operates on multiple levels of meaning. Their personal romance reflects larger themes of divine love and human response. The individual transformation of two people becomes a metaphor for cosmic reconciliation. Their marriage represents the union of heaven and earth, spirit and flesh. The political dimensions of their relationship cannot be ignored. Joseph's position as vizier makes his marriage a matter of state policy. Asenath's royal connections cement his authority while bridging Hebrew and Egyptian interests. Their personal happiness serves broader diplomatic purposes. Love and politics intertwine in ways that strengthen both. The allegorical interpretation reveals deeper theological meanings. Joseph represents the divine bridegroom seeking his beloved. Asenath embodies the human soul, initially resistant but ultimately responsive to divine love. Their courtship parallels the classic pattern of divine pursuit and human surrender. The romance becomes a parable of salvation. The cultural clash between Hebrew and Egyptian worldviews creates dramatic tension. Joseph's monotheism confronts Asenath's polytheistic background. His foreign appearance and customs challenge her aesthetic preferences. Her prideful independence resists his gentle authority. These conflicts mirror broader tensions between faith and culture. The transformation of Asenath's character drives the narrative forward. Her initial horror at meeting Joseph gives way to curiosity, then fascination, and finally complete devotion. The change occurs gradually, reflecting realistic psychological development. Yet the speed of her conversion suggests divine intervention in natural processes. The symbolic marriage ceremony carries meaning beyond personal union. The joining of Hebrew and Egyptian represents the reconciliation of opposing forces. The bride's white robes symbolize purity and new beginning. The groom's royal garments reflect divine authority and earthly power. Every element serves as both literal and figurative purposes. The political implications of their union extend beyond immediate diplomatic advantages. Their marriage creates precedent for future interfaith relationships. The success of their partnership demonstrates that love can bridge cultural divides. Their happiness proves that difference need not prevent unity. The allegorical reading transforms the lovers into archetypal figures. Joseph becomes the suffering servant who achieves vindication through divine favor. Asenath represents the nations called to acknowledge divine truth. Their union symbolizes the ultimate reconciliation between God and humanity. The personal story carries universal significance. The text's treatment of beauty reveals sophisticated aesthetic theory. Asenath's initial concern with physical appearance gives way to appreciation of spiritual beauty. Joseph's attractiveness stems from divine radiance rather than merely human features. The story suggests that true beauty originates in spiritual reality. The power dynamics within their relationship evolve throughout the narrative. Initially, Joseph holds all the advantages of position and divine favor. Asenath's conversion equalizes their spiritual status, while her royal birth maintains her dignity. Their mature relationship reflects mutual respect and shared authority. The theological implications of their love story challenge traditional religious boundaries. Their successful marriage demonstrates that divine love can transcend ethnic and cultural differences. The story argues for inclusive rather than exclusive interpretations of religious identity. Love becomes the primary criterion for spiritual acceptance. The literary technique of the author reveals considerable skill in balancing multiple meanings. The surface narrative maintains reader interest, while deeper allegories reward careful attention. The text operates successfully on literal, moral, and spiritual levels simultaneously. Few ancient authors achieve such sophisticated literary integration. The psychological realism of the care of the characters adds credibility to the allegorical meanings. Asenath's emotional journey from fear through curiosity to love reflects genuine human experience. Joseph's patience and gentleness make his divine role believable. The fantastic elements remain grounded in recognizable human psychology. The social criticism embedded in the love story challenges contemporary assumptions about marriage and identity. The text suggests that individual choice should supersede family tradition in matters of faith. The story advocates for romantic love over arranged marriage. These themes would have been revolutionary in ancient contexts. The eschatological dimensions of their union point toward future fulfillment. Their marriage prefigures the ultimate reconciliation between divine and human, sacred and secular. The personal happiness they achieve suggests the joy awaiting all who respond to divine love. Their story becomes a preview of universal restoration. The influence of their love story extends beyond the immediate narrative. Their relationship serves as a model for subsequent interfaith marriages in religious literature. The pattern of resistance, conversion, and union becomes a template for similar stories. Their romance establishes archetypal patterns that resonate through centuries. The artistic potential of their story continues to inspire creative works. Their love transcends cultural boundaries while maintaining distinct identities. The drama of their courtship provides rich material for artistic interpretation. Their union suggests that love can overcome any obstacle when blessed by divine providence. Death and disappearance. The biblical narrative falls silent about Asenath's fate. After the birth of her sons and their blessing by Jacob, she vanishes from the recorded story. This absence creates a mystery that has puzzled readers for millennia. Her disappearance raises questions about the nature of biblical storytelling and the role of women in ancient narratives. The silence might reflect the biblical author's focus on patriarchal lineage. Once Asenath fulfills her primary function as mother to Joseph's sons, her individual story becomes less relevant to the narrative's purposes. The text follows the male line of descent, leaving wives and mothers in the background. This pattern repeats throughout Genesis. Some scholars suggest she died young, perhaps in childbirth or from disease. Ancient mortality rates claimed many women during their reproductive years. Her death might have been too common an occurrence to warrant special mention. The biblical text reserves detailed death notices for major patriarchal figures. The apocryphal traditions offer different perspectives on her fate. Some texts suggest she lived to see her sons reach maturity and establish their own families. Others propose that she returned to Egypt after Joseph's death, spending her final years in the land of her birth. These traditions attempt to fill the gap left by biblical silence. The possibility of royal burial deserves consideration. As the wife of Egypt's vizier and daughter of a high priest, Asenath would have been entitled to elaborate funeral rites. Her tomb might have been constructed according to Egyptian customs, complete with grave goods and religious inscriptions. Such monuments could have survived to modern times. Archaeological evidence provides tantalizing possibilities, but no definitive answers. Several tombs from the relevant period contain evidence of foreign influence in burial practices. Some show combinations of Egyptian and Near Eastern elements that might reflect mixed cultural marriages, yet none can be definitively linked to Asenath. The deliberate erasure theory suggests that later editors removed references to her death and legacy. This hypothetical editorial process might have aimed to minimize foreign influence in Israelite traditions. The revision would have served ideological purposes, emphasizing Hebrew identity over Egyptian connections. The literary function of her disappearance creates dramatic effect. Her absence from the narrative's conclusion forces readers to focus on her son's destiny rather than her personal fate. The storytelling technique emphasizes the consequences of her life rather than its end. Her influence continues through her descendants even after her story ends. The theological implications of her vanishing point toward different interpretations. Some see her disappearance as evidence of divine protection, suggesting she was taken directly to heaven like Enoch or Elijah. Others interpret her absence as a reminder of human mortality and the transience of earthly relationships. The feminist perspective on her disappearance highlights systematic marginalization of women in ancient texts. Her removal from the narrative reflects broader patterns of female erasure in patriarchal literature. The story moves from her dramatic conversion to her son's prominence, bypassing her individual agency and continuing story. The practical considerations of ancient storytelling might explain her absence. Oral traditions often focused on genealogical connections rather than biographical completeness. The story's preservation and transmission would have emphasized as elements most relevant to the community's identity. Personal details about women might have been considered less essential. The mystery of her fate enhances her literary power. Her disappearance transformed from historical figure to archetypal character. The absence of closure forces readers to imagine her continuing story. Her legacy becomes more important than her individual destiny. The comparison with other biblical women reveals similar patterns. Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel all disappear from the narrative after fulfilling their maternal roles. The text provides death notices for some but not others. The inconsistency suggests that individual stories were preserved based on their relevance to larger theological themes. The speculation about her final years opens possibilities for creative interpretation. Some traditions suggest she became a teacher of Egyptian women seeking to convert to Hebrew faith. Others propose that she served as an intermediary between Hebrew and Egyptian communities. Her unique position would have made her valuable for diplomatic purposes. The influence of her disappearance on later traditions proves significant. The absence of canonical information about her death allowed later writers to develop elaborate theories about her fate. These speculations reflect the theological concerns of each generation rather than historical memory. The modern fascination with her missing story reflects contemporary concerns about women's historical visibility. Her disappearance symbolizes the countless women whose stories have been lost to historical neglect. The search for her fate becomes a quest for female voices silenced by patriarchal tradition. The literary technique of her vanishing serves narrative purposes beyond simple omission. Her absence creates space for readers to project their own concerns and interpretations. The gap in the story becomes a place where contemporary relevance can emerge. Her disappearance paradoxically increases her present power. The erasure of women in Scripture. The pattern emerges across biblical literature with troubling consistency. Women enter the narrative stage, play crucial roles, then vanish without explanation. Their disappearances reveal systematic editorial choices that prioritize male lineage over female contribution. This literary archaeology exposes the ideological foundations of ancient storytelling. The method of erasure varies, but the result remains constant. Some women simply disappear from the narrative without explanation. Others receive brief death notices before fading from memory. Still others find their stories absorbed into their husbands' or sons' biographies. The techniques differ, but the marginalization remains consistent. The theological justification for this pattern draws on concepts of patriarchal authority and divine order. Ancient editors apparently believed that emphasizing male leadership served religious purposes. The focus on fathers and sons reflected broader social structures where women's roles were defined primarily through relationships to men. The literary consequences of this erasure extend beyond individual stories. The systematic removal of female perspectives creates a distorted view of ancient religious experience. The resulting narrative suggests that women played minimal roles in spiritual development. This impression contradicts evidence from other ancient sources. The comparison with contemporary ancient literature reveals the uniqueness of biblical women's marginalization. Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Greek texts often feature strong female characters, whose stories receive full development. The biblical pattern of female erasure appears more pronounced than in surrounding cultures. The editing process likely occurred over centuries, with each generation of scribes making choices about what to preserve and what to omit. The cumulative effect of these decisions created texts that systematically minimized female contribution. The process reflected changing social attitudes toward women's roles in religious communities. The archaeological evidence suggests that women played more prominent roles in ancient religious practice than biblical texts indicate. Temple inscriptions, artwork, and ritual objects point to female religious leadership. The disconnect between archaeological and textual evidence suggests significant editorial intervention. The sociological factors behind female erasure include concerns about religious purity and cultural identity. Communities under pressure from surrounding cultures might have emphasized patriarchal structures to maintain distinctiveness. The marginalization of women could have served as a boundary marker between Hebrew and foreign traditions. The psychological impact of this erasure on female readers extends across generations. Women studying these texts encounter a religious world where their voices seem irrelevant. The absence of female models creates spiritual challenges that persist into modern times. The erasure continues to influence contemporary religious practice. The recovery project undertaken by modern scholars attempts to restore lost female voices. Feminist biblical criticism employs various methods to uncover hidden female perspectives. These approaches reveal the richness of women's religious experience that earlier editing obscured. The work of recovery continues to yield important insights. The hermeneutical challenges posed by female erasure require sophisticated interpretive strategies. Readers must distinguish between descriptive and prescriptive elements in texts shaped by patriarchal editing. The challenge involves separating divine revelation from human cultural limitation. This work demands careful theological reflection. The interfaith implications of female erasure affect religious dialogue and cooperation. Communities that have marginalized women's voices face challenges in contemporary contexts where gender equality is valued. The need to address this heritage becomes important for religious credibility and relevance. The literary analysis of erasure patterns reveals editorial techniques and priorities. The systematic nature of female marginalization suggests coordinated editorial policy rather than random omission. The patterns point to specific ideological commitments that shape textual development. Understanding these patterns illuminates the text's formation process. The historical reconstruction of women's actual roles requires careful attention to scattered evidence. Brief mentions, genealogical lists, and legal provisions provide clues about women's real experiences. The reconstruction project reveals a more complex picture than the main narrative suggests. Women's actual influence exceeded their textual representation. The contemporary implications of recognizing female erasure extend beyond academic study. Religious communities grappling with gender equality must address their textual heritage honestly. The recognition of systematic female marginalization creates opportunities for corrective interpretation and inclusive practice. The theological reflection on female erasure raises questions about divine revelation and human limitation. The tension between scriptural authority and recognition of cultural conditioning requires careful navigation. The challenge involves maintaining reverence for sacred texts while acknowledging their historical limitations. The educational implications of understanding female erasure affect religious instruction and formation. Students learning about biblical women need to understand both what the texts say and what they omit. The fuller picture includes recognizing the processes that shaped textual development. This knowledge creates more informed and critical readers. The spiritual consequences of female erasure continue to influence contemporary religious experience. The absence of female models in sacred texts creates ongoing challenges for women's spiritual development. The recovery of lost voices becomes important for spiritual wholeness and religious authenticity. Asenath in modern eyes. The revival of interest in Asenath's story begins during the feminist movement of the 20th century. Modern readers recognize in her narrative themes that resonate with contemporary concerns about identity, choice, and religious freedom. Her story speaks to questions about assimilation, cultural authenticity, and the possibility of transformation that transcends ethnic boundaries. The literary renaissance surrounding her character produces novels, poems, and plays that reimagine her life for modern audiences. These works explore themes that the ancient texts only hint at: the psychology of religious conversion, the challenges of intercultural marriage, and the price of abandoning one's birth culture. Contemporary authors find in her story rich material for exploring modern dilemmas. The feminist theological movement embraces Asenath as a model of female religious agency. Her decision to convert comes from personal conviction rather than male coercion. The story depicts her as an active participant in her own spiritual journey, making choices that determine her destiny. This interpretation challenges traditional readings that minimize women's religious autonomy. The interfaith dialogue community finds in Asenath's story a template for religious encounter. Her respectful approach to learning about Hebrew faith while maintaining her dignity offers guidance for contemporary religious conversations. Her willingness to change while preserving her essential identity provides a model for sincere religious inquiry. The story suggests that authentic conversion enriches rather than diminishes the convert. The multicultural movement sees in Asenath's experience a mirror of modern immigration and assimilation challenges. Her struggle to maintain authentic identity while adapting to new cultural expectations resonates with contemporary immigrant experiences. Her success in creating a hybrid identity that honors both backgrounds provides hope for modern multicultural families. The psychological study of her conversion process reveals insights into the nature of religious change. Her journey from rejection through curiosity to acceptance follows patterns recognized in modern conversion studies. The emotional stages she experiences mirror those documented in contemporary religious transformation. Her story provides a case study in the psychology of belief change. The artistic interpretations of her story multiply across various media. Contemporary artists find in her narrative rich visual and dramatic possibilities. Her beauty, transformation, and ultimate triumph provide compelling subjects for artistic expression. The story's archetypal elements translate effectively across cultural boundaries. The theological debates surrounding her story continue in modern contexts. Progressive religious thinkers emphasize her inclusion as evidence of divine openness to all peoples. Conservative interpreters focus on her complete transformation as evidence of necessary religious conversion. The story serves both universalist and particularist theological positions. The scholarly research into her historical context reveals the complexity of ancient religious and cultural interchange. Modern archaeology and anthropology provide new insights into the world she inhabited. The sophisticated nature of Egyptian-Hebrew relations in her time suggests that her story reflects realistic historical possibilities. The liturgical revival of her story brings her narrative into contemporary worship contexts. Some religious communities incorporate her story into their worship cycles, using her conversion as a model for spiritual renewal. Her feast day appears in some liturgical calendars, acknowledging her role in salvation history. The counseling field finds in her story useful insights for working with clients struggling with identity issues. Her successful navigation of cultural transition provides a model for therapeutic work with immigrants and converts. The story's emphasis on personal agency and gradual change offers hope for those facing similar challenges. The comparative religion studies utilize her story to explore patterns of religious conversion across cultures. Her experience provides a case study in the universal aspects of religious transformation. The story's themes appear in various religious traditions, suggesting common human experiences of spiritual change. The literary analysis of her story reveals sophisticated narrative techniques that speak to modern readers. The psychological realism of her character development appeals to contemporary literary sensibilities. The story's use of symbolism and allegory provides rich material for literary interpretation and analysis. The popular culture adaptation of her story continues to evolve. Contemporary novels, films, and television series draw inspiration from her narrative. These adaptations often emphasize themes of female empowerment and cross-cultural understanding. The story's romantic elements appeal to modern audiences seeking meaningful love stories. The academic study of her story contributes to broader understanding of women's roles in ancient religious communities. Her narrative provides evidence for female religious agency in contexts where such agency was supposedly limited. The story challenges assumptions about women's spiritual capacity in ancient societies. The inspirational value of her story extends beyond religious contexts. Her transformation from privileged but isolated princess to influential mother and spiritual leader offers hope for personal growth and change. The story suggests that authentic transformation remains possible regardless of background or circumstances. The therapeutic applications of her story provide resources for those struggling with identity and belonging. Her successful integration of multiple cultural identities offers a model for contemporary multicultural individuals. The story's emphasis on personal choice and authentic transformation provides hope for those seeking to redefine their identities. The educational value of her story extends to various academic disciplines. Her narrative provides material for studying ancient history, religious studies, women's studies, and comparative literature. The story's complexity supports interdisciplinary approaches to understanding ancient cultures and their continuing relevance. The spiritual legacy of her story continues to inspire those seeking authentic religious experience. Her direct encounter with the divine provides a model for contemporary spiritual seekers. The story's emphasis on personal transformation over institutional affiliation resonates with modern religious sensibilities. The lioness, forgotten. The circle closes where it began. The forgotten wife emerges from the shadows of history, her story finally told. Yet even in its telling, mystery remains. The lioness of the title reveals herself not as a fierce predator, but as a woman of quiet strength, transforming herself and her world through faith and courage. The metaphor of the lioness captures her essential nature. In Egyptian mythology, the lioness represented both destruction and protection, the fierce mother who defends her cubs. Asenath embodies this duality, destroying her former self to protect her new identity. The transformation requires both courage and wisdom, qualities the ancient world associated with the lioness. The forgetting that gives the story its poignancy reflects broader patterns of historical amnesia. Women's stories disappear first from official histories, their contributions minimized or ignored. Asenath's fate mirrors that of countless women whose influence shaped history but whose names faded from memory. Her story becomes a symbol of all the forgotten women whose lives mattered. The shadow metaphor suggests hiddenness, but also protection. Shadows preserve what might otherwise be destroyed by harsh light. Asenath's story survives precisely because it remained in the margins of biblical narrative. The peripheral position that seemed to diminish her actually ensured her preservation. The shadow becomes a place of refuge and renewal. The echoes of her story continue to resonate through literature, theology, and popular culture. Her narrative establishes patterns that repeat in later stories of conversion, transformation, and interfaith marriage. The archetypal nature of her journey ensures its continuing relevance. Each generation discovers new meanings in her ancient story. The mystery that surrounds her fate adds to her literary power. The absence of closure forces readers to imagine her continuing story. Her legacy becomes more important than her individual destiny. The mystery transforms her from historical figure to archetypal character whose influence transcends specific circumstances. The faith that drives her transformation reveals the universal human capacity for spiritual growth. Her journey from pagan princess to covenant mother demonstrates that authentic change remains possible, regardless of background or circumstances. The story offers hope for those seeking to reinvent themselves through authentic spiritual experience. The courage she displays in abandoning her former life inspires contemporary readers facing similar choices. Her willingness to embrace uncertainty for the sake of spiritual authenticity provides a model for those struggling with questions of identity and belonging. The story suggests that authentic transformation requires both courage and faith. The wisdom she demonstrates in navigating complex cultural and religious boundaries offers guidance for contemporary multicultural situations. Her ability to honor her heritage while embracing new commitments provides a model for those seeking to integrate multiple cultural identities. The story suggests that wise integration enriches rather than diminishes the individual. The influence she exerts through her sons extends her impact across generations. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh carry her legacy into the Promised Land. Her foreign birth becomes a source of strength rather than weakness for the Israelite community. The story demonstrates that diversity can strengthen rather than threaten communal identity. The memory of her story survives in fragments and hints, in apocryphal texts and rabbinic speculation. These scattered pieces suggest a narrative too compelling to be completely forgotten. The persistence of her story, despite systematic marginalization, testifies to its enduring power. Memory preserves what official history neglects. The redemption theme that runs through her story speaks to universal human longing for second chances. Her transformation from pagan princess to covenant mother represents the possibility of radical personal change. The story offers hope for those seeking to overcome their past and embrace new possibilities for the future. The legacy she creates through her faith and courage continues to inspire those seeking authentic spiritual experience. Her direct encounter with the divine provides a model for contemporary spiritual seekers. The story suggests that authentic transformation requires both personal commitment and divine grace. The silence that surrounds her later years creates space for contemporary imagination and interpretation. The absence of detailed information about her fate allows modern readers to project their own concerns and hopes onto her story. The gap in the narrative becomes a place where contemporary relevance can emerge. The lioness metaphor with which the story began finds its fulfillment in the woman who emerges from the shadows. Asenath proves herself to be fierce in protecting her new faith, courageous in facing uncertainty, and wise in navigating complex cultural situations. The lioness forgotten becomes the lioness remembered. The final meditation on her story suggests that being forgotten may be less important than being worthy of remembrance. Her life created ripples that continue to spread across the centuries. The influence she exerted through her faith, courage, and wisdom ensures that her story will continue to inspire long after her name might be forgotten. The echo of her story in contemporary literature, theology, and popular culture demonstrates its continuing relevance. Each generation discovers new meanings in her ancient narrative. The story's archetypal nature ensures its survival and adaptation to new contexts. The lioness forgotten becomes the lioness who cannot be forgotten. The mystery of her fate reminds us that some stories are more powerful for their incompleteness. The gaps in the narrative invite readers to become participants in the story's continuing creation. The forgotten wife becomes a character whose story we continue to tell, whose influence we continue to experience, and whose faith continues to inspire those who seek authentic transformation in their own lives.